Chapter 458. I couldn't even sense her bloodline rank. This was another issue he found rather unsettling. Within the camp, time passed very quickly. Both Glade and Havrina healed up after a few days, but they were still drained, so they had to skip a couple of more training sessions. Glade was crestfallen after losing her special class title and shut herself from everyone, including Angie. This made Angie grow restless day by day, and she couldn't stop herself from setting another meeting with Gustav. Gustav assured her that everything would be fine, and Glade could still challenge a weaker special class by the end of the month and become a special class cadet again. So it was only a matter of time. Angie met with Endrik secretly after he asked to see her. No one had an idea of what went down, but from that day onwards, Angie started to see Endrik as irredeemable and made the decision to be the one to defeat him herself, as she felt guilty for stopping Gustav in the past. Endrik got into more trouble within the camp due to repeated bullying and unnecessary brutality during duels. However, his punishments were barely harsh enough and, most of the time, cut short. Gustav and Vera also began to move together more across the camp and would be seen with each other on several occasions, to the extent that rumors began to circulate about them dating, which sparked jealousy. Gustav ignored rumors and background talks and concentrated on becoming stronger. After some time, he finally reached the peak of Gilberk rank and started to visit the dungeon area day by day to mostly increase his EXP and also secretly train, making use of Yarki. 2.5 months later, within a massive tunnel underground, a 200 feet dark worm with a body full of purplish poisonous spikes shot out of the ground, heading for a dirty blonde-haired kid who was seated in a cross-legged format in front. The tunnelway was so wide and large, so even with the massive body of the mixed-breed worm, it was only covered a small space. THRHHRKKK. The spikes protruding out of the massive dark worm's body began to spin as it shot forward, while it made a weird shrieking sound while opening its mouth wide in a bid to swallow the dirty blonde kid whole. The youngster, who seemed to be closing his eyes at the time, suddenly sprang them open the moment the creature's wide-open mouth was about to devour him from behind. Swoof! A pinkish force blasted forth from his being, spreading into the surroundings like a wave and disappearing the next instant. The moment it made contact with the creature, it found itself unable to move an inch further. Gustav, who happened to be the blonde-haired person, slowly stood to his feet and turned around. His gaze was so sharp and piercing that the instant the worm sensed his stare, it subconsciously shrank back, even though it was currently under the hold of Yarki. A level 27 dark venom worm, Gustav analyzed. Just the head of the creature in front of him was at least 5 times bigger than his entire body. Although it wasn't as large or as powerful as the serpentine mixed breed he had an encounter with within the border back then. However, it was still quite a fearsome-looking mixed breed. I should be able to hold it for about 30 seconds more, Gustav said as he moved towards the left body area and stood in front of one of the massive purplish spikes protruding from it. Gustav brought out a small red syringe-like equipment and gently stabbed it into the tip of the purplish spike, taking a small portion of toxin. This should be enough for Mara, he muttered before pulling out and keeping it back in his storage device. 20 seconds left. Gustav counted the time as he moved back to the front of the creature. I won't waste my time battling with you, so it's best I end you in the easiest way possible right now, Gustav muttered as he raised his hand. Open! As he mouthed that, the massive creature opened up its mouth. Gustav proceeded to walk into it while activating God Eyes. His eyes were looking a bit different upon activation this time. Not only was there scarlet and green color, but now there was a mysterious yellow glint within. Gustav walked on the salad-filled tongue area as he moved towards the side. Not here, not here. Gustav seemed to be searching for a particular spot within its massive dark mouth. 10 more seconds, he mouthed just before he got to the middle part of the tongue area and looked up at the mouth's ceiling. Found it, Gustav said as he crouched. A weird aura surrounded his being before he suddenly leaped up, throwing his right fist towards the ceiling of the mouth as he ascended. Milky glow covered all of Gustav's figure, especially his right fist, which was thrown upwards, reaching the ceiling of the mouth before the rest of his body. Bang! Thrya! A loud sound reverberated across the place as Gustav tore through the mouth area of the mixed breed towards its brain before bursting through, tearing out of its head. Fly! 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 Brain matter and blood scattered across the entire place as Gustav landed back in front of the creature. His body wasn't drenched by its body matter even after going through all that, but the environment was currently stained with greenish blood and goo. Time up! The instant Gustav muttered under his breath. Thum! The mixed breed massive body plopped to the ground as it lay lifeless in place. Gustav slowly deactivated God Eyes and stared with a slightly satisfied look on his face. The new ability of God Eyes sure comes in handy, he said while turning around. I've been here for close to 24 hours already, it's time to go, Gustav said while turning around. Level 16 is the lowest I can go in the meantime. Anything beyond that is asking for death, Gustav analyzed as he moved forward. Scattered piles of torn-up corpses of mixed breeds could be seen all over the place as he moved forward. He was currently within the Embark camp dungeon, which was for exclusive training on battling mixed breeds. Feeling better now, thank you all for the concern. They'll try to keep the updates to 2 chapters per day and do a mass release next week. Chapter 459. Gustav had been coming here for close to 3 months to train himself and get through the levels of the dungeon. The lower you descended, the more powerful the mixed breed. Gustav's limit currently was level 16, and it was even quite tough for him to get to his current stage. He couldn't defeat the creatures in level 16 using normal means, which was why when he wanted to kill the dark venom worm, he had to get into it so he could attack from within. Even with that, he had to make use of God Eyes to spot the weaker section of the creature's mouth area so he could end it before he ran out of time. Normally, the senior cadets formed 4 teams before heading in if they were going without any supervision from instructors, but Gustav had been coming here himself since day 1. The officers guarding the dungeon entrance advised against it on his first day here since they couldn't do anything to restrict him due to his title. However, Gustav totally disregarded their advice, saying he wanted to explore on his own. Most of the senior cadets who had witnessed his exchange secretly openly called him a fool while also mentioning he was going to get himself killed because of pride. According to them, several cadets had also lost their lives here because they were too prideful and didn't want to be a part of any team. To Gustav's expectations, they were right. He left the dungeon on that day with numerous injuries after making it through the first 4 levels in several hours. What they didn't know was Gustav was purposely pushing himself to this point to see where it would get him on his first try, but they mistook it for pride. His major reason was not wanting to reveal the full extent of his abilities, which he could use freely if he wasn't in any party, and he did. Unfortunately, he couldn't go beyond the first 4 levels even after using everything he had. Gustav was practically half dead and almost completely drained of energy on his way out of here on the first day. Normally cams were installed in some sections of the dungeons. Still, it was impossible for them to be everywhere due to the massive size of the dungeons that made it even seem like the cadets coming in were few in number. It was actually possible for the MBO to install cams everywhere, but monitoring every footage would be an issue due to the size of the place. For this reason, every cadet coming in was given an emergency ringer. This was to alert the instructors that they needed help the instant they came into contact with a mixed breed they could not handle. They only had to tap or send the intention if it was wired to them. Some cadets still ended up getting killed either way due to their pride and believing they could handle creatures that were way more powerful than them, which caused them not to use the ringer. Gustav spent close to 3 months working on making use of his abilities and increasing his strength. During his first few tryouts, every time he came here, he would leave with grievous injuries and nearly depleted energy, causing his healing factor to reduce. The thing about the dungeon was the fact that attacks were unpredictable. Groups could be attacked at any point in time while exploring the place. Gustav noticed that the mixed breeds here had higher intelligence and, even when weaker, were able to strategize before attacking the groups for better results. He had fallen prey to this before he came to the realization. He was finally able to reach level 16, which was only close to half since the dungeon had about 47 levels. No group of senior cadets had managed to go beyond level 40, and even the last ones that reached that low were nearly wiped out. Gustav was already close to the level of strength of some of the seniors and was still growing very fast. Whenever he came into contact with some of those seniors in groups, they would always stare at him like he was some monster. I guess this is why he's already an officer. Most of them had these thoughts in mind, as some were fascinated about him more than Elevra. Bang! 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 Boom! Gustav once again engaged a group of man-looking lizard mixed breeds as he made his way up the dungeon. Bang! He slammed the head of the last one into the wall, causing it to burst apart like a warhammer slammed into a watermelon. Gustav continued moving towards the top and out of this particular section. In about 10 more minutes, he finally arrived at the entrance of the dungeon. His uniform was once again soaked in blood as usual, but it wasn't his blood. The officers guarding the entrance greeted him as he handed over the emergency ringer to them and left. At this time, it was already around 9 in the night, and today happened to be a Sunday, which was why Gustav was able to spend a lot of time here. Less than 2 months left. I should really make sure I increase my strength properly before my next mission, Gustav muttered on his way back to his room. Swoosh! His hair blew back as he bolted across the camp at a very high speed. Minutes later, Gustav was back in his apartment preparing something to eat. It was almost 5 months since they arrived here, and Gustav could not believe the kind of improvement he had gone through. He was currently at the martial rank, which was a rank many mixed bloods across the world were stuck in. He had also noticed that channeling his bloodline at this stage was now slower than before, so he wasn't too sure about getting to the next rank before he went on his first mission. However, he was more focused on his system leveling, which was also a good way of improving in strength regardless of being bloodline rank. System interface, Gustav called out as he decided to check his current level. Chapter 460. System interface, Gustav called out as he decided to check his current level. After opening the system interface, he went on to check his current attributes. Underscore 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 host attributes. Name: Gustav Crimson level 45 class, subparallel being exp 7 41 800/9 230 000 HP 26 900/26,900 energy 15 000/15 000 attributes: strength 147, perception 146, mental fortitude 146, agility 144, speed 142, bravery 144, intelligence 145, charm 79, defense 144, vitality 146, endurance 145, attributes points 49 underscore 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 underscore. His progress so far was just as he had planned. It was already a year since he first got the system, and his life had changed so much within that time frame. He wasn't feeling gratified or anything like that because he knew he still had a long journey ahead, and he wasn't powerful enough yet. His strength now was at a level where he could easily lift something weighing up to 30,000 pounds, 13,600 kilograms, without activating any bloodline. Gustav was the strongest in camp, and no one doubted his strength. However, they still weren't sure if he was as powerful as Elevra because strength wasn't the only requirement to winning a battle. His speed and agility, too, were now one of the best, while perception was on a whole different level. Gustav could sense what was happening 200 feet away and give a detailed explanation of the scenario like he was present. His perception really came in handy and made it look like he could predict attacks during battles. The last 2 special class cadet challenges that went by were boring for him since there was no one to challenge. On the bright side, he was glad Glade made her way back to being a special class by defeating one of the lower-ranked special class. Gustav went on to check on his bloodlines after closing the Host Attributes panel. Bloodlines, genetic transformation bloodline, grade B++ abilities tied to bloodline frowny face shape shifting, joint movement, size manipulation, cognitive concealment, partial mimicry, partial gene manipulation, beast transformation bloodline, grade C+ abilities tied to bloodline frowny face partial mutated bull transformation, blood wolf transformation, Savernia serpent transformation, demonic sonic bunny transformation, solar worm transformation, atomic manipulation bloodline, grade C+ abilities tied to bloodline frowny face, disintegration of atomic structures, structural disembowelment, gravitational energy container, grade B+ abilities tied to bloodline, energy installment, energy discharge, gravitational imbalance, gravitational field charge, blend, body compressed energetic flames, grade B, compressed body parts flammable explosion, ticking erosion, compressed energy charge, nuclear discharge. There were still many other bloodlines on the list, but Gustav was more interested in checking the one he had just experimented on today. Gustav had made use of the upgraded recreation to join 3 bloodlines together. This was what he was busy with in the dungeon before the worm attacked. Fortunately, he had just finished up in time to activate his Yarki. This wasn't the first time he was making use of recreation to combine 3 bloodlines. He already did it twice before this, making this his 3rd successful operation. 9 bloodlines had been made into 3, helping him increase the slots of bloodlines and making these ones more useful than they used to be. He had been careful with the combinations so far so he wouldn't end up creating an unstable bloodline. At the very least, now he had 3 more bloodlines that were almost on par with the main bloodlines he made use of during battles. His main bloodline was still the most important to him, but Gustav was finding it hard to understand the new abilities he got after the process of bloodline strengthening. He had tried partial mimicry, which had been extremely hard to pull off since he automatically transformed back to himself when his body made contact with anything. Partial mimicry enabled him to transform to any non-living thing for a particular time limit, but even before the time limit was reached, Gustav always found himself transforming back to normal. A small touch, and he was back to being Gustav. He couldn't let his thoughts wander for even a second because it required immense concentration. Gustav had always seen himself as someone with a high amount of concentration, but this one was quite beyond him, unlike he expected. The other ability, which was partial gene manipulation, was even harder because he didn't even know how to activate it. He had asked the system for help several times. Still, as expected, he was ignored because the system wanted him to figure it out himself, especially since it was his original bloodline. Gustav didn't relent and had been working on this as well throughout the past few months. He only made progress in partial mimicry but not so much for partial gene manipulation. Gustav closed the system interface after checking out the abilities of the new bloodline he created. Nuclear discharge seems like it could be a pretty powerful ability. He'll try making use of it in the dungeon tomorrow, Gustav decided. He went on to check the state of his Yarki, sending his senses into his body. Gustav's senses lingered on it, and compared it to the size a few months ago. It had increased almost twice its initial size. The pinkish fiery-like existence within him swayed beautifully, giving off an enchanting vibe. Currently, Gustav Yarki was at the point where it could be controlled better and more effectively without Gustav having to expose himself. If he wanted to use it on a smaller and less powerful scale where the entire vicinity would not be affected, he could direct it towards an opponent now. Gustav had been initially worried about using his Yarki in public because of recognition, but with him learning how to control it more, it was only a matter of time before he came up with a way to use it without being noticed. Gustav later went to his bed after a few more minutes and laid on it while plotting his next moves. "It's about time I dealt with Hendrik," he said internally, but then a series of memories drifted into his mind. He's been acting a bit different lately. Less aggressive, Gustav never thought he'd even say such words internally, but this was what had been truly happening. He noticed that Hendrik was becoming less and less of a brute each day. Gustav initially wasn't in any way bothered by this, either did he think anything much of it since he just assumed Hendrik was up to something shady again. He already knew Endrik was responsible for the rope cut during the field test, even though he didn't do it personally. Gustav wasn't that stupid that he wouldn't get to the bottom of such a matter, but he had decided to play it cool and hold everything off for the right time when he was ready to get rid of Endrik once and for all. He acted like he knew nothing of Endrik plotting in secret because, in the end, he planned to get rid of Endrik. But as time passed, he noticed Endrik was getting less and less aggressive, and he was starting to believe it wasn't an act anymore. Gustav thought about it, and felt there must have been a kind of catalyst somewhere. Ever since he started personal training with Instructor Mag. He's been changing, Gustav came to this realization. Endrik was given punishment for roughness during one of the exercises 2 months back, and Instructor Mag happened to be given the task to properly punish him. She decided to start training him personally in his free time, preventing him from barely having any kinds of breaks. Gustav didn't even see this as anything at that time, but now he felt there was more to it. He'll watch him for the entire week before making any plans, Gustav decided. I also need to ask Vera if the parasitic strain inside him has become fertile, he added internally before closing his eyes. Gustav still hadn't found out if anything besides what Vera inputted was within Endrik since he hardly even saw Endrik these days. The night went by in a flash, and Gustav woke up early the next morning to channel his bloodline a little before the morning routine began. After about an hour, he moved towards the field alongside E and the rest for the start of the morning routine. 1.5 hours was the time Gustav spent to complete the routine alongside Elevra, who no longer reached the starting point before he did. Both of them were now getting there simultaneously, and on several instances, he had managed to finish before her. Elevra was very competitive, and really made sure she gave Gustav a hard time winning even though the routine was not about who came first. During the whole free time, Gustav moved towards the location for intergalactic warfare, and even though it wasn't time for the cadets to have their training here, Gustav was still given access since he was already an officer. Gustav proceeded towards a secluded part of the underground structure and stationed himself there. Chapter 461. This chapter and the next have a bit of R18 content. During free time, Gustav moved towards the location for intergalactic warfare, and even though it wasn't time for the cadets to have their training here, Gustav was still given access since he was already an officer. Gustav proceeded towards a secluded part of the underground structure and stationed himself there. He activated cognitive concealment, which completely got rid of his presence, making it so that he wouldn't be spotted unless someone laid their eyes on him. The simulation chamber wasn't too far from where he was situated, so his perception was able to travel towards the room, and he could already sense 2 figures within. Still making use of perception, Gustav was able to make a mental outline of their body sizes and already could tell that these were Instructor Mag and Endrik. After all, in the entire camp, only one person was shorter than Gustav's initial height. Gustav also knew Endrik's current height. Endrik was in a weird position which made Gustav understand that Endrik's personal training with Miss Mag had begun. Gustav suddenly got an eerie feeling as Instructor Mag turned her face to look in his direction with squinted eyes. Instructor Mag was staring as if she could see through the thick walls situated in between them from her position. After a few moments, she looked away. Gustav's anxiety reduced as he saw that and calmed down a little. Gustav remembered her bloodline had nothing in common with seeing through physical objects, so he realized that she may just have sensed something momentarily due to her strength which was way higher than his. Gustav realized that cognitive concealment may not be as foolproof as he thought since he was still practically a weakling after all. He initially wanted to spy on them using Endrik's life sign, but he would only be able to see things from one point of view, which was Endrik's. And he also wouldn't be able to hear anything since God eyes only gave him visuals. On the other hand, everywhere his perception lingered upon, no matter how far, Gustav was able to hear anything going on in that location. Since he wasn't figured out, Gustav continued to watch them for some time, trying to see if anything out of the ordinary was happening. Time went by, and they ended their personal training when it was time for a new training session. Gustav found his way out of there and went to attend the next training session. In a flash, the whole day went by just like that, and Gustav still hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary happening during Endrick's reigning with Miss Mag. Also, it wasn't that Endrick had become completely docile. He just seemed to be restraining himself compared to before. Gustav noticed him lashing out at another cadet today, but a few seconds into it, Endrick stopped and moved away, which was something Gustav had never witnessed before. Whoever Endrick lashed with would always end up receiving a form of physical attack with his telekinesis. Then he would make it seem like he didn't do anything. Gustav still felt this might be due to him being on punishment, and decided to keep watching him till his punishment phase was over. Then, he would see how Endrick would behave to others. The spying continued for a few more days, and Gustav still didn't notice anything out of the ordinary during his training with Instructor Mag. Gustav met up with Vera again on this day at their usual place within a secluded garden-like area within camp. "How is it going with the parasitic strains? Are they ready now?" Gustav asked her. "Not yet. In 3 weeks to a month's time, it should be ready. It will remain dormant until I activate it. Vera will not activate it without Gustav's permission." Vera responded with a submissive tone. That's also when his punishment phase would end with Instructor Mag." Gustav realized that this was perfect timing. He would also be able to observe Endrick after this to see if he would return to his usual pompous self. "All right, keep me posted," Gustav responded with a smile before rubbing Vera's head like she was a little kid. "Good job," he added, causing a delightful smile to appear on her face. "Now we really need to make sure you're ABI." Before Gustav could complete his sentence, a weird sound drifted into both of their ears. Gustav had a slightly confused look on his face as he and Vera turned to the side to stare in the direction where the sound was coming from. "Pa! Pa! 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 Pa!" Slapping sounds reverberated across the place. Initially, one would think a battle was going on somewhere, and maybe someone was getting slapped on the face, but the voices that came along with them discarded any thoughts of this being a battle. "Ard, yes, give it to me. Anna, you're so tight down there. Yes, take it, you little bitch. Pa! 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 Pa!" Well, in a way, it was a battle between two opposite sex, but this was a different kind of battle. Gustav's perception and eyes traveled towards the source of the sound. His eyes widened as he noticed what was going on behind a tall pile of the bush towards the west. 2 cadets, one male and the other female, could be seen in compromising positions. The female had her back arched in a crouching position. The male was positioned behind her, pulling her hair as he thrust his hips back and forth towards her buttocks, which perked out in front of him. They were both stark naked. This was the first time Gustav was witnessing such a scene. "WWH at reteach you I doing?" he voiced out with a slightly croaky voice as blood rushed to a particular part of his body. He knew exactly what was going on, but he just couldn't believe that had witnessed such a scene. "Haha, being a virgin shouldn't make you this dumb. Did you forget about biology? As you can see, they're performing exercises needed for procreation." The system responded in his head with a burst of laughter. Chapter 462. Pa! 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 Gustav. The sounds were still as loud as ever. "You're free to properly look at it. You are going to need the lesson. You don't want to disappoint your future partner now, do you?" The system kept teasing. "Shut up. Who says I don't know how it's done?" Gustav responded internally with an annoyed tone. "Oh, you do? You Earthlings have a funny way of naming things and tend to name even things that don't make sense, so tell me. What is the name of the style they're currently engaging in?" The system asked with a light chuckle. It's called. "You know what, just shut up, no one cares." Gustav responded with a tone of embarrassment. "Ha! You are a mixture of retarded and robotic. To top it all, you're a virgin. Among all your researches, you never thought to try and check this out." Gustav. While the system was verbally destroying Gustav internally, Vera was in her own world of thoughts. It's going in and coming out. So this is how it is done. Vera had an intrigued look as her face reddened while she also stared in the direction of the sound. This is not a conducive environment for training, Gustav thought as he felt his pants tightening. He didn't even want to look down because he was afraid of what he might see. Gustav quickly turned to the side to stare at Vera. Vera, we have to leave here, he said while reaching out to cover her eyes. Gustav's palm was big enough to cover her entire face, but before he could pull her along to leave, he heard her mutter his name underneath her breath. Duel. S. Tav. Vera's lips quivered as Gustav's palm was placed on them. He felt her hurried breath and quickly pulled his hand from her face. Her entire face had turned bright red as she stared at Gustav with a gaze of extreme desire, while biting her lower lip. I want us to do what they're doing, she said with a slightly shaky voice while staring into Gustav's eyes. Gustav found himself speechless after hearing the sudden declaration. After a few moments of losing composure, Gustav responded. No, let's go to another location to train, he said while proceeding to turn around. Vera grabbed him by the hand, causing him to halt his movement, and turn around to face her once again. Why? Don't you want to be inside me? I will let you call me whatever names you like, Vera said while proceeding to place Gustav's left hand on her chest. Gustav felt his hand press onto Vera's left boob, sinking deeply into her uniform due to its immense softness. Stop it, I'm not interested in being inside you, Vera, Gustav answered while pulling his hand from her chest. It says otherwise, Vera responded while pointing at the area below Gustav's abdomen. Gustav slowly looked down, and his face turned red as he noticed visible the hard-on. His pants displayed the bulge, which showed that he was affected. Oh, looks like you're not totally a robot, the system suddenly voiced out. Shut it, Gustav said internally before turning to the side. This doesn't mean anything, Gustav said to Vera. No, I remember in biology class, the teacher said it happens when a person is aroused, which means you truly want to do it with me, Vera voiced excitedly. Gustav breathed in deeply, calming himself as his body returned to normal. Listen to me, Vera. I'm interested in doing it, but not with you and definitely not now. I don't have time for all these, Gustav said to Vera before turning around to leave. He felt his ears might explode if he continued remaining here. Those two cadets were still going at it, and their voices were loud. Vera had a crestfallen expression on her face as she followed behind Gustav. Maybe one day you'll be interested in doing it with Vera, Vera consoled herself internally. Both of them left the area entirely and arrived in another place to train together. The time they spent together today became awkward, and Gustav eventually had to end it earlier than intended. He had been trying to get Vera to learn how to quicken the speed of her parasitic strains, so what happened with Endrik would not end up being their downfall in the future. The speed at which she could take control of a subject and turn them into a puppet was quite a downside to Gustav. After they were done, Gustav returned back to his room, and a few minutes later he came in with the others. Yo Gus, hey Gustav, hi Gustav. The four of them waltzed in and sat on the sofa area like they owned the place. What's for dinner? He was the first to ask. I was waiting for you to come cook again. Why don't you come and bless us with your delightful dishes, Gustav said while placing his hand behind him. Really? He asked with a delighted expression. No! Hell no! Definitely not! Ildris, Falco, and Timmy voiced with severe looks of disapproval. Haha, Gus already said I could. He voiced out as he jumped to his feet and moved towards the direction of the kitchen. Falco and Timmy quickly jumped forward as well, blocking his path. We won't let you pollute our bellies, Falco voiced out. A game of tag began with them as they moved across the room, trying to hold E down. Gustav just shook his head with a smile and moved towards the kitchen. Minutes later, all five of them were sitting at the dining table enjoying the meal Gustav had prepared. So Gus, are you finally ready to tell me why you hate your little brother so much? He suddenly voiced out. He's not my brother, did you forget? Gustav said while taking another mouthful of food. Okay. So why do you hate the kid whom you share similar features with, such as the same biological engineered DNA, looks, coldness, brutality? Should I go on? He stated. Nah, I think you've made your point, Gustav responded. So. Chapter 463, S. Nah, I think you've made your point, Gustav responded. So. He voiced out one more time before waiting for Gustav to explain. Gustav took a few more bites from his plate before he started speaking. He wasn't really interested in talking about his sad past tales again, but he wanted to bring he up to speed since it looked like he was the only one in the dark among the five. Falco, Ildris and Timi felt it wasn't their place to tell Gustav's story to he, which was why they kept quiet about it all this time. Gustav began to narrate his childhood experience, and how he used to have a below F-grade bloodline. About 20 minutes later he had an expression of anguish with several other mixed feelings. He had listened to Gustav's narration and didn't understand how people could put a person through such. He came from an entirely different place where there was no condemnation regardless of bloodline grade, so he couldn't relate, but he knew that there were no lies in everything Gustav had narrated. Now he understood why Gustav had such a personality. After all, experience shapes the kind of person you become. It also brings forth the attitude you portray to certain situations and reaction to certain situations. So, whatever happened to your birth parents? He asked. Oh, I don't care about them. Would have killed them, but there's no fun in that. It's better for them to live their miserable lives seeing me at the top and full of regrets knowing we share no ties to one another. Gustav responded with an unbothered expression. That's just too much, man. There's no amount of apologies or words that can be said to wash away the scars from those experiences, so I won't bother saying sorry, but I'm here for you anytime, man. He said while placing his hand on Gustav's left shoulder. Ildris, Falco and Timi also stood to their feet, and all of them placed their hands on Gustav's shoulders with a look of comfort on their faces. We're here for you too, Gus, Ildris said with a smile while Timi and Falco nodded in response. An unblemished smile appeared on Gustav's face. Yeah. I'm good now, thanks guys, he responded. Did you join the MBO because of this? You have plans of doing something about the situation of the world, right? Because I know it's quite common for such to happen in many places. Falco asked. I'm no hero. I joined the MBO for myself. I want to become powerful enough so I will never be at the mercy of anyone ever again. Every other plan is secondary, Gustav responded with a small laugher. Except for the 5-year quests. Those are very important too, Gustav added internally. Haha, that's totally you, Gustav. I would be worried if you said you wanted to become some kind of hero. I am that guy, not you. He laughed out loud while responding to Gustav's answer. But then you still have plans of changing things, don't you? Ildris seemed to have picked a hint from Gustav's response, so he questioned. That's a goal that is very far away since there are still many things I need to do first, like destroying my brother so he doesn't become a thorn in my flesh in the future. Gustav responded with a thoughtful gaze. Oh, he and Ildris voiced out at the same time. Isn't he still like 12? Timi asked. Yeah, doesn't mean he's not dangerous, Gustav responded. Timi wanted to respond to that, but after thinking about it, he couldn't find the right words. I kinda see what you mean. No one can say Endrik isn't the most talented cadet in the first years, even though he's currently not the strongest. If he is allowed to keep growing, he can become one of the most powerful officers to ever exist within the MBO. Character-wise, that isn't so good since things will most likely get worse if he reaches such a stage while still being such a brat. Ildris analyzed. This was the first time everyone was seeing Ildris analyze someone so much besides Elevra, who he was related to. Everyone understood from this point that Ildris really disliked Endrik. I don't know, I'm kinda on the fence about this one. He spoke before Gustav could respond. From what you said earlier, you've given him several chances to change, and even came close to killing him once if not for Angie's interruption which caused you both to drift apart afterwards. He paused at this point as his face displayed a contemplative expression. We're still in the MBO camp undergoing training. Why don't you give it time and see if he would change? From my point of view, no matter how much stronger he becomes, so long as he doesn't leave the campgrounds, he can harm nobody, so there's still enough time to study him and end him when it's necessary. At that point we will be sure that there's no redemption for him whatsoever. You're Gustav, so you'll always overpower any first year, and that includes Elevra. He stated with a profound tone and smiled when he got to the end of the sentence. Are you gonna claim the first position on the rankings soon? He asked afterwards. Not yet, but before I leave for my first mission in 1 month time I definitely will be taking that first spot, Gustav said with a confident tone. Haha, don't worry, I'll watch over Angie for you while you're away. He added with a burst of laughter. Who said anything about Angie? Gustav retorted with a dismissive look. Yeah, keep acting like you don't care, we all know you do, Tsundere-chan. He jested. Shut it, Gustav voiced out. Everyone began to laugh at this point, making the atmosphere less tense than before. Our first mission will most likely be in a 6 to 7 months' time, so we gonna rot in here. Don't forget your brothers when you're out there, he said with a smile. Chapter 464. Yeah, it won't be long before I'm back anyways, Gustav responded. At this point, everyone already knew that compared to them, Gustav would only be spending about 2 years in camp and would be undergoing his first mission in a month. They only had the chance of spending lesser than 4 years in camp if they also attained an official rank in the MBO like Gustav, or if the higher-ups deemed them powerful enough. The first was almost impossible without doing extremely well in upcoming missions, so everyone was truly aiming to do their best in their first missions. Gustav, who was having his first mission in a month, was not even feeling tense like many of them were. He wasn't even taking it seriously, to the extent that he still had plans of stowing away during the mission to go check on Boss Danzo in Burning Sands City. Several minutes later, he and the rest moved back to their rooms to rest for the night. Gustav thought about ES suggestion and felt it might not be bad to keep watching Endrik for now. He could always challenge and defeat him before the year runs out, so he doesn't spread his vileness outside the camp, since there was no real supervision in the real world. Even his mission wouldn't be supervised due to the fact that the MBO wanted them to be as real as possible. If a cadet died on their first pseudo-mission, the MBO considered such a cadet useless. Although there were still precautions put in place just in case the mission became higher than the level a cadet could handle. Gustav spent the night strategizing and channeling his bloodline. Right now, he was so strong that he could stay the entire week without taking a wink of sleep, and he would still be energized. Using this, Gustav would spend weeks wide awake, which was one of the reasons for his speedy improvement. The next morning came, and as usual, everyone moved towards the location for the start of the morning routine. During the day's training, Gustav could hear rumors flying around about him once again. This time he was dumbfounded by the new rumors. A cadet who had a bloodline that allowed him to display visualizations showed the scene where Gustav and Vera were within the secluded garden area together. He just happened to have captured the part where Gustav's palm was placed on Vera's chest. And then, after Gustav and Vera were no longer visible in the massive visualization, he displayed the sounds of those other cadets having S*X not too far from their initial position. The entire camp now conceived the idea that Gustav and Vera had sex. He's a beast, did you hear the way she was moaning? Oh my god, I totally want him to do me too. So dirty, they couldn't just find somewhere else to do it. Hey, I thought that Vera was a sweet, innocent girl, I guess I was wrong. Many of the cadets had different thoughts after witnessing such a scene. Vera seemed shy, but she didn't want Gustav's name to be soiled, so she tried explaining several times to people who had confronted her. As expected, no one believed her words, even though she mostly emphasized the fact that she was trying to rope Gustav in, but he refused. Gustav later met up with her, and asked her not to waste her time trying to prove their innocence since everyone had made up their mind about it. Some of the instructors later invited Gustav and Vera for a chat with them. They called it a chat, but it was more like an interrogation. So, when are you two ready to confess to your dubious deeds and receive punishment? One of them asked. Gustav and Vera were seated in their midst while the 4 instructors encircled them. There's nothing to confess to, Gustav responded before Vera could say a word. You remember in the rules it stated that sexual intercourse in the public is not allowed. The penalty for being caught is quite grievous. At least try to conduct an investigation before jumping to conclusions. Obviously, the clip isn't proof enough since it didn't explicitly display us having sex. You only heard sounds and came to the conclusions that it was us, Gustav retorted without an ounce of fear. Vera was quite shaky the whole time, but seeing Gustav respond to their statements confidently, her fear was starting to wither. Fair point. Just as expected of you, Officer Gustav, you never failed to live up to your name. One of the instructors smiled as he spoke. The instructors already saw this but still decided to interrogate them as part of a test to see how they would respond. However, when we do investigation from our end and it is found out that you two truly engaged in such compromising act, there will be severe consequences. One of them announced. You could lose your officer rank if you're found guilty, and you Vera could end up being sent out of camp. It's fine. As long as you guys can find incriminating evidence against us, I'll gladly drop out of the MBO camp. You can leave Vera out of it, Gustav responded before standing to his feet and leaving the interrogation room while pulling Vera along with him. The 4 instructors stared at each other with contemplative expressions. All right, let's bring forth the one who shared the visuals all around camp, the senior officer in their midst voiced out. As they walked back to their residences, Vera kept staring at Gustav occasionally. After doing this several times, she finally decided to reveal what she was thinking of. Aren't you bothered? Vera asked him. Nope, not in the slightest. If the MBO can't even get their facts right, they don't deserve me, Gustav answered confidently. Vera's eyes shimmered as she heard that. Gustav was even looking more attractive to her now. But I will get to the bottom of this. Whoever is responsible for such expensive joke will answer to me, Gustav responded with a cold tone before he resumed walking. Chapter 465. But I will get to the bottom of this. Whoever is responsible for such expensive joke will answer to me, Gustav responded with a cold tone before he resumed walking. Gustav met up with E, who was waiting not too far away from the location of the place where they were interrogated. It should only take a few minutes, Gustav said to him, and he nodded in response. Why is he? What are you? Vera was a bit confused as she stared at both of them while voicing out. You can go, Vera. They'll handle things from here, Gustav instructed. All right. Vera complied and started walking away while Gustav and he moved to the side to wait behind a tree. Both of them waited for several minutes before a male cadet wearing glasses with a buzz cut walked out of the facility ahead. Gustav and he remained in their positions and watched him walk across the path. After he was hundreds of feet away from the tree, they started following him from behind. Gustav and he tailed the youngster until they arrived at a particular part of the camp that was slightly secluded. Gremlin, how about we have a little chat? Gustav voiced out from behind, causing the youngster to halt his steps. The moment he heard Gustav's voice, he turned around with a wary expression written on his face. Before he could even say a word, Gustav had already dashed forward as he conjured a vortex behind Gremlin. Tchrkkk. Swoosh. Gustav's body traveled so fast, arriving before Gremlin in almost an instant as he reached out his hand and grabbed Gremlin by the throat before pulling him into the vortex along with himself. Swoof! The vortex closed up the instant he also jumped inside. They appeared at a high mountain top that was literally poking the clouds. Gustav held Gremlin by the neck while standing on the ledge with his arm outstretched forward. Gremlin was only hanging from the top with Gustav's grip on his neck. Beneath him, there was no solid ground beside the one that was thousands of feet down. All he could see was the fog and the ledge, which he couldn't reach because of Gustav's tight grip on his neck. Let go! Gremlin tried clawing and kicking as he yelled for Gustav to let go of him, but no matter what he did, it was to no avail. This brought him to the realization that he really couldn't do anything against Gustav's strength. He stood behind Gustav and looked around the massive mountain range. This is quite this scary place. If you didn't bring me here, I probably wouldn't have known that such a place existed. He voiced out. Yeah, it's a good place to hide a corpse. Good thing only the senior years are permitted to come here and they don't use this place often, Gustav said with a devilish smirk. The MBO camp was like a city, so there were still many places that weren't in use for the time being, and this place happened to fall into that category. It was off-limits for the first years as well, but since Gustav was an officer, he could bring anyone he wanted here using his official privilege. Now don't you have something to tell me, Gremlin? Gustav proceeded to ask while staring into Gremlin's eyes. Tell you? What are you talking about? Gremlin asked while stuttering slightly. Don't play dumb with me. You know very well what I'm talking about, Gustav responded with a threatening tone. Gustav was still disappointed at himself for not noticing that someone was spying on him and Vera. Even though he had perception and could sense his surroundings, he was distracted by what they had witnessed that he didn't really pay attention to this guy who happened to have been watching from another spot. Are you talking about the display? I only visualize what I witness, Gremlin voiced out in response. Since you were there, you clearly know that I'm innocent. Who put you up to this? Why did you do it? Gustav asked while stretching his hand even further outwards. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav's right arm lengthened further by 3 feet. Whoosh! The wind blowing across the place further induced Gremlin's fear as his glasses were nearly knocked off his face. You dare not drop me! You will lose your place as a cadet in the MBO. Haha, you will lose everything, you can't do anything to me! Gremlin screamed out with a shaky voice induced with a little aggressiveness. It was as if he was trying to mask his fear. Inwardly he hoped Gustav wasn't as crazy as the rumors said. Oh really? Maybe I have to remind you that as it stands I already have a chance of losing everything. Wouldn't it be better to just seal my fate? Gustav smirked as he slowly loosened his grip from Gremlin's neck. Don't let go! Don't let go! Gremlin screamed out in fear as he held onto Gustav's arm to prevent himself from falling. Even if I am cast out, at the very least I get to end you. Even the MBO can't bring a dead person back to life. Also, you aren't even worth the trouble even if they could, Gustav added with a small chuckle. At this point, Gremlin's face had paled severely and kept losing color by the second as he stared at Gustav's demonic expression. He's crazy, he's very crazy. Gremlin had never felt so scared of his peer before. Thinking about Gustav's words, everything made sense, and he didn't seem like he was bluffing. Behind East stood in place, watching the scene. He was just there as support, so he didn't butt in. Phew, Gus sure is scary. I really pity his future enemies, he said internally. Okay, I'll talk. Gremlin finally decided to compromise after a few more moments. Gustav's lengthened arms started returning back to normal size as he pulled Gremlin towards his direction. He placed Gremlin on the side of the ledge and stared at him. I'm listening, Gustav said with a reminding tone. How can you guarantee my safety if I tell you the truth? I don't want to mess with such people, Gremlin said with a scared tone. What are you talking about? Gustav asked with a tone of curiosity. I'm talking about those who put me up to this. I can't reveal their doings without consequences. Can you guarantee my protection? Gremlin voiced out once again. Your protection is already secured within the MBO. Why would you be scared of this group? He asked from behind. Oh yeah, haha, my protection is so secure that you two can bring me out here in the middle of nowhere and end my life. Although you wouldn't go scot-free with such act, that doesn't mean my protection is secure, Gremlin voiced out with a tone of sarcasm. Well, that makes sense, he responded with a thoughtful gaze, and Gustav agreed with that statement. What if they were dealing with people who didn't really care about the consequences of their actions like him? although it was almost impossible since everyone was here with the purpose of becoming an MBO officer. No one would want to throw that opportunity away, logically speaking, but Gustav still felt something was amiss in this whole situation. "Tell me what we're dealing with first," Gustav proposed. "Can you or can you not guarantee my safety?" Gremlin asked once again. "Can't. Unless I know what I'm dealing with," Gustav responded. "Well then my lips remain sealed," Gremlin said while proceeding to sit on the ground. "You're just gonna have to choose which end you prefer. I throw you off the cliff if these people come after you while being under my protection," Gustav threatened once again. Gremlin's shoulders creased up as he heard that. Alright, you win," he voiced out but remained in his seating position. "So, like I mentioned, there's this group of cadets who approached me 1 week back with a proposal. That proposal involved framing you," Gremlin began to narrate. "They forced me and told me that if I didn't comply they'd erase me from existence, and showed proof that they had a way of getting rid of cadets without having to face any consequence." Gremlin had a look of fear on his face as he reached this point. "It was quite spooky, and believe me, they weren't bluffing, they really do have their ways," he added. "Who are these people?" Gustav asked. "They blindfolded me, so I couldn't see their faces. When I was being shown proof, they made sure to hide their looks as well. I don't know how they coordinated such an operation without any of the instructors noticing anything, even though the camp is supposed to be well supervised." This made Gremlin even more scared as he thought about this. His ability to display visuals of what he had witnessed couldn't help him at this point, because not only did the group manage to hide their identity, they also took him to somewhere where he couldn't visualize anything. All this was planned? "The sex and you meeting in that position with your girlfriend," Gremlin continued narrating. "She's not his girlfriend." He chipped in from behind. Alright," Gremlin responded and continued after a brief moment of stopping. "They also asked me to broadcast it that way all across camp," he added. "I see. Now I want you to broadcast the rest, which involved I and Vera leaving the place. I want you to show everyone the truth. Those who were involved in the act should also be revealed, as well as the rest of the visuals," Gustav instructed. I can't do that," Gremlin replied. "Why?" Gustav raised one eyebrow up as he asked. "Because I didn't see the real people involved in the scandalous act. I was only allowed to see you and Vera," Gremlin explained. They really took precautions. This means you can only show me and Vera, but the main culprits will not be revealed," Gustav muttered, and Gremlin nodded in response. "I want to know who these people are. And you will help me expose them," Gustav said. "Will I be protected?" Gremlin asked. "If you stay around me all through the coming days, you'll be safe." If they had enough strength to deal with me straightforwardly, they wouldn't try to use such tactics, Gustav stated. "Now display the rest of the footage about I and Vera," Gustav instructed. Gremlin nodded and proceeded to close his eyes before joining his palms together. Hours later, Gustav was back in his room thinking about what had happened today. It was currently nightfall, and everyone in camp no longer suspected Gustav and Vera of doing anything inappropriate. The question now was, who were the true culprits, and why was Gustav framed in the first place? A lot of cadets could guess that it was probably one of those who were jealous and disliked Gustav because of his strength. They felt since this was the MBO, it would only be a matter of time before the main culprits were caught. What they didn't know was even the instructors had no idea who was truly responsible, because they couldn't find the footage for that particular area. Gustav was later brought to speed that the footage had been somehow deleted, leaving the true culprits to wander free across the camp without punishment. Gustav was in his room thinking about how the whole issue was complicated. He wanted to meet one of the instructors to talk about the situation with Gremlin and the group, but he was having second thoughts. There's no way a bunch of cadets would be able to pull all these off without an inside backing, Gustav thought. There must be an officer somewhere helping them from behind the scenes. Footage disappearing and them claiming they can do things without suffering consequences. Definitely they have some kind of inside backing. It won't be wise to meet up with an instructor. I can't trust any of them. Chapter 466. They definitely have inside backing. It won't be wise to meet up with an instructor. I can't trust any of them, Gustav said internally as he scanned for the images of instructors internally. He happened to picture Officer Mag in his mind for a few seconds and was already having second thoughts. This was due to the fact that compared to other instructors, Officer Mag seemed detached and was more likely to remain by herself, not engaging in friendly fellowship like other instructors. After a few more seconds of thinking, Gustav decided to brush her off, as he recalled another person. There's her too. Commander Celia. Gustav remembered the main commanding officer in camp who addressed them on their second day of arrival. Gustav recalled that she originally reported to Commander Cheyenne, which means she was put in her current position by the great commanders. Thinking more about it, Gustav figured there was no way she'd be involved in such a scheme like that, since it would mean the great commanders didn't have good judgment in selecting the head of this place. The only problem now was her appearance was quite scarce. Since the first day, Gustav and the others had only seen her once. It seemed like she was always leaving and coming back to camp due to her position, which made her quite busy. Gustav decided she was the only one he could go meet with the situation, so he decided he was going to head to her office the next day. The night went by in a flash, and the next day arrived. Morning routine with the others was quite disturbing for Gustav because he had to tolerate Gremlin following him about. Gremlin just couldn't stop talking about so many things, his fears mostly, and how he thought every random person close to them performing the morning routine as well seemed suspicious. Gustav couldn't rely on Gremlin's instincts at this point because his fear was controlling his judgment. Good thing Gustav didn't expect anything from him in the first place besides proving that he and Vera didn't commit such acts in the open. After the morning routine ended, Gustav couldn't observe Endrik as usual because he had to go to visit Commander Celia's office. He checked for the location on his pass and started heading there. He left Gremlin in E and Eldris' care. Both of them were more than enough to handle any bullshit that those unknown group of students could dish out, so he wasn't worried. Swoosh! Gustav dashed across the camp, heading towards the hall they arrived in on their first day here. This hall, which was the arrival and exit point from the Embark camp, was actually where the commander's office was located. Thinking about it, Gustav understood that the hall was constructed at this location just in case there were intruders. It would be taken care of instantly. Since she was the commander, he had no doubt that she was the strongest existence in camp. Gustav arrived at the vast wasteland that extended upwards and charged through it, reaching the top in a few seconds. He stopped when he noticed the massive white structure in the distance. It was built to look similar to an old cathedral with tower-like roofing and a pointy cross-like tip. However, it was at least 50 times bigger in size as it covered a large portion of this area. Gustav arrived at the entrance and got beeped. In an instant, he brought out his pass. Arriving in, several other cadets could also be seen moving across the place, heading for and also coming out of the 3 massive mirrors standing in the middle of the hall. These 3 mirrors displayed 3 different locations of the outside world, so it was obvious that those going in were heading for missions while those coming out of any of them were back from missions. These were senior cadets. An instructor who was heading out of the hall noticed Gustav. "Officer Gustav, what are you doing here?" he asked with a slightly surprised look. "What? Am I not allowed to be here?" Gustav asked with a slightly irritated expression. "Oh no, that's not what I meant. Your pass grants you the permission here, so you're definitely allowed here, but I hope you know that beyond sightseeing you're not allowed to do anything else," the instructor said with a soft tone. "There's no need to explain anything. I have my reasons for coming here anyways." "Thank you," Gustav responded before proceeding to move along. The instructor stared at Gustav's back as he walked away with a slightly disturbed expression before he continued on his way. Gustav moved towards the southwest area, where there was a corridor that led towards a small stairway. Following this, Gustav arrived at the top of the stairway, where a door was positioned. According to his pass, this was the office of Commander Celia. Gustav was about to knock on it when it opened up. Officer Crimson," A feminine voice rang out as Gustav stopped his hand in front of the slim lady who spoke. She was dressed in an orange uniform similar to that of Gradier Zenatus, and had a small oval-shaped face with brown hair packed towards the back with a ponytail. "Commander Cilia," Gustav voiced out as his hand descended. "I'm here to see you," he added. Commander Cilia had a slightly confused expression as she heard that before responding. "I still have a few minutes to spare, let's go in," she said before turning around. Gustav followed her in. Moments later, Gustav was narrating what had gone down recently within Commander Cilia's office. In a minute, he had given a quick breakdown of the whole situation. "Such a thing went down and I wasn't informed?" Commander Cilia was surprised by the revelation. "I haven't met anyone about the group. I don't trust any instructor," Gustav explained. "Oh. I see. Why?" she asked. "Such a group can't delete a footage without the help of someone on the inside. They are being assisted by an officer." Gustav voiced out his speculation. "That makes sense." Commander Cilia already felt this was Gustav's reason, but she wanted to make confirmation. She proceeded to touch the side of her forehead while closing her eyes. "Mag, I need you in my office ASAP," she voiced out. Mag? The image of a short female instructor phased into his mind as he heard Commander Cilia call out this name. "I need to uncover these bastards before they cause any real damage. They failed this time because I was the one target. If it was a weaker and more gullible cadet, they'd probably have their way with the backing they have. That would mean that you, Commander Cilia, are not capable enough to protect the cadets here," Gustav stated. "Relax, Gustav," she said with a smile. "Everything will be taken care of," she added just before a weird sound was heard. "Ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch." The door opened up, and Instructor Mag walked in. Her short frame looked the opposite of menacing, but her glare was something else. "Did you just say Big Sis was incapable?" she voiced out as she moved towards Gustav. "If she isn't able to protect the cadets even from themselves, then yes." "Wait, did you just say Big Sis?" Gustav voiced out the last part with a look of surprise. He stared at both of them repeatedly, trying to make comparisons. "Oh, I see it now," Gustav said internally as he noticed their similar head shape and eye structure. These two were the type of siblings that you wouldn't know were related to each other unless you looked hard enough. "She's more capable than anyone in this place," Officer Mag said with a cold glare. "I will only believe that after I see the group exposed," Gustav responded with an unbothered expression. "It's all right, you two." Commander Cilia stopped them before they could go any further with their words. "Mag, I have an important business to attend to at the moment, so I won't be able to deal with the current issue at hand, and this is why I have called you here," she added before calling out to Officer Mag. "Come over." Officer Mag did as instructed and walked over. Commander Cilia placed her index finger on Officer Mag's forehead. "Zun." The instant she withdrew her hand, Officer Mag had been brought up to speed about the whole situation. "Mag, I'm entrusting this assignment to you since he'll be away. I want you both to work together to expose the cadets and officer behind them," Commander Cilia said before standing to her feet. "I'm 5 minutes late already, I have to go," she said while walking towards the door. "You both can use this office as a secure meeting place. I'll ask the secretary to let you both have access at any time," she added before leaving. Gustav and Officer Mag were left together inside the office. "Humph. Let's go meet this gremlin first. I have some questions for him," Officer Mag decided before pulling Gustav along with her. The moment they arrived outside the hall, she grabbed hold of Gustav, and the gravitational force around them suddenly turned weird. "Fui!" Officer Mag shot into the air with Gustav in her grasp, traveling across the camp with speed. So she could fly. Gustav was quite surprised at this revelation. Officer Mag's bloodline gave her the ability to manipulate gravitational force, and she had trained it to the point that she could use it to fly. They arrived at the area that led to the special class residence, and she dropped there with Gustav. "I'll wait here, go fetch him," she said while finding somewhere to sit. Gustav dashed towards his residence building and arrived there in a few seconds. As he headed up, he happened to meet Ildris in the corridor heading towards the teleportation elevator with a wary expression. "What's wrong?" The moment Gustav laid his eyes on him, he figured that something was out of place. "Gremlin has gone missing," Ildris answered instantly. "What? How?" Gustav voiced out with an expression of disbelief. "He left. On his own," Ildris responded as they stood in front of the circular blue light. "He said he wanted to see the scenery of the corridor area, and I told him not to leave till I found Timmy to stay with him because I was busy with something inside. It was only a span of 10 minutes when I stopped sensing their presence. I came out here, they were both gone. I asked them not to leave the building," Ildris explained. "If Timmy was with him, then we can assume that a special class is a part of that group, and they must have been waiting for the opportunity to see Gremlin with a weaker special class cadet," Gustav voiced out. "They didn't expect that a special class cadet would be a part of the unknown group. At this moment he happened to be coming from somewhere. He went out for a brief period earlier, which was why he wasn't in the vicinity when it happened." Ildris explained the situation to him as well. "I can find him, but I need you to be ready to transport us there the instant I do," Gustav said as he activated God Eyes. His eyes glowed scarlet and green with a hint of gold before he closed them. Life signs tracking activated. Gremlin's life sign appeared in Gustav's mind as his dark visual changed. He found himself in a kind of canyon staring at a group of people with weird dark marks that surrounded him. His vision would occasionally tilt from side to side as it seemed that Gremlin was being beaten up. As his vision focused on the ground, Gustav could see blood, and he quickly used that opportunity to look around. "Let's go, I found the place," Gustav shouted out as he deactivated life signs tracking. Chapter 467. This area was in between two tall mountains' walls, leaving a long dark path at the bottom with flowing water. At the moment, they were on the left side beside the flowing water. This area was pretty dark. "Let's go. I found the place," Gustav shouted out as he deactivated life signs tracking. "This place on the map?" Gustav pointed at another place in the camp that was restricted to first years. "The Devil Canyon?" He instantly recognized it and clasped both hands together before separating them. Thrick! A vortex was instantly formed in front of them, and they all jumped in. In a particular part of the camp where the clouds were always dark, and clouds hung over two massive greenish-looking mountains, there was a pathway of murky green stream flowing in between both mountains that extended very far due to the size of both mountains. Lightning bolts occasionally appeared in the sky, and 1 in every 10 bolts would land in between both mountains, electrocuting the stream. The senior cadets knew very well why this place was called the Devil Canyon. They would come training in this place, and there was a chance that they'd get struck by lightning if they could not react in time. Aside from that, occasional weird weather occurrence where a crazy tornado could just appear out of nowhere and sweep everything in the vicinity away. This was yet another place within the camp that was restricted to the first-year cadets. Originally, places that were restricted to first-year cadets would be barricaded with invisible fences that would only stop them from going in but would allow senior cadets so long as they had their passes. Gustav had brought E to almost everywhere restricted because, with his authority, he could bring anyone with him. You would not have been able to open a vortex to this location and appear there with Ildris if not for Gustav's presence in their midst. At the left side of the canyon towards the middle, a group of 4 masked cadets surrounded a cadet putting on glasses and having a buzz cut. Bang! 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 They occasionally landed hits on him, causing the glasses to fall off his face while he bled. Blood oozed down his nose and face as he fell face flat after receiving some brutal hits. 2 of the cadets would move towards him and pick him up again to receive another round of beating. "Did you think you could go scot-free with the stunt you pulled?" one of them shouted out before shooting out a whitish beam from his hand. Bam! Gremlin's chest caved in as he was sent blasting backward after the beam made contact with his chest. Bang! He slammed into the side of the mountain, causing a small vibration to occur. 2 of the masked cadets moved towards him again to pick him up and brought him back to his initial position, ignoring the blood oozing from his mouth and his exposed chest. TWOTS. As Gremlin coughed out blood, he voiced out. You thought we couldn't do anything to you so long as you were with Gustav Crimson, right? The other one on the left voiced out as she walked forward. From her stature and voice, it was obvious that it was a female. They'll tell you now that we have someone better than Gustav Crimson on our side, so you were never safe from the start. She voiced out as a weird red circle appeared around her right arm. Such foolish action will lead to your demise. She voiced out as more red circles began to appear behind her. Twi. 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 As the circles fired up, ready to shoot, the entire vicinity began to vibrate due to the force. I guess this is the end, Gremlin said internally as he accepted his fate and prepared to be skewered. You will die here today for going against us, and even Gustav cannot save you. Just as she shouted out, ready to fire, a purplish vortex appeared from above. Are you sure about that? A familiar masculine voice filled with such power and confidence was heard from within the vortex. Even before the owner of the voice appeared, all 4 masked cadets already knew who it was. Gustav Crimson! They all voiced out in shock tones just as Gustav and along with Eldris, landed on the ground behind them. Thumb! The female cadet who was about to fire earlier shot out the energy by mistake due to shock after seeing Gustav. Several red beams traveled forward with intensity towards Gremlin, who was still in a kneeling position. Combination has been activated, sprint plus dash swissish. Before anyone could even react, Gustav had already swooped forward at a speed that made everyone around him look like they weren't moving. The beams that were traveling at very high speed were now similar to kids running from Gustav's point of view. Gustav arrived in front of Gremlin before the beams could, but there wasn't enough time to get him out of the way, so he stretched out his palm. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as the beams collided with Gustav's palm, causing the ground to crack apart from the impact. Gasp! Although it was impossible to see their faces through the mask, it was obvious that the 4 cadets had their mouths open after witnessing what had just happened. Gustav was standing in place with his hands stretched out, and parts of his uniform had holes on them due to some of the beams slamming into his body. However, even with all this, there was not a single scratch to be found on his body. He didn't move an inch backward, either was there any blood. He just stood there like a solid rock. Even the mountain on the side would take damage at the point of such powerful impact. Gustav! Gremlin had teary eyes as he noticed Gustav standing in front of him. Are you okay? Gustav said as he slowly lowered his arm. Smoke was still erupting from his palm and other affected body parts, but he remained unscathed. I'm fine, Gremlin said before coughing out more blood. Gustav turned around and picked him up by the collar with one hand before flinging him like a weightless sack towards Eldris, and he caught him and dropped him in their midst. Keep him safe, I don't want to be disturbed, Gustav said to both of them as he ripped his uniform apart, displaying his well-chiseled and moderately ripped upper half. It's been some time since I fought like this. You lots have truly angered me, Gustav voiced out, causing the 4 cadets to stare at him with visible fear in their eyes. Chapter 468. It's been some time since I fought like this. You lots have truly angered me, Gustav voiced out, causing the 4 cadets to stare at him with a visible look of fear in their eyes. Whumsmsh. In one movement, he arrived in front of the masked female cadet that had just shot out the beams with his hand outstretched. Grab! His palm grabbed hold of her neck in the next instant, and before anyone could react, he dashed towards the mountain wall on the side with full force while pushing her forward. Bang! A loud tremor rang out as she collided head-on into the mountainside with a strong force, creating a massive body-sized hole within. Krryyhh. Cracks started to spread from the point of impact to other parts of the mountain area. Gustav pulled her body out of the hole. He smashed it on another part of the mountainside, causing a similar effect once again before pulling her out once more. The mechanical mask on her face had already been cracked in half, and blood could be seen dripping down her neck as Gustav held her up. He stared at her face and tried recalling if she looked familiar in any way. One thing he could tell was the fact that she was a normal cadet. The other masked cadets in the vicinity started panicking and calling out to a particular group member. "Hamlet, get us out of here!" The other male beating gremlin up seriously earlier voiced out to the tallest one in their group. A blue glow started gathering around them as the tallest one in their group called Hamlet raised his hands up. Gustav noticed this and quickly threw the girl in his hand away before dashing forward again with speed. Even with Gustav's quickness, the bodies of the remaining three were already fading away before his arrival. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A long 3 feet milky-colored blade appeared in Gustav's hand, which he threw forward towards Hamlet. The speed coupled with the power of this throw caused the blade to travel forward like lightning. Screeve! It passed through Hamlet's left shoulder like a streak, and what came next was a loud scream. Kairar! My arm! Hamlet's left arm flew several hundred feet in the air, spiraling repeatedly before landing after Gustav's atomic blade cut through his shoulder. Plop! As it fell to the ground, so did Hamlet, with blood oozing out of where his left hand was formerly located. The three of them bodies had returned to a solid state after Hamlet sustained such damage. He kept screaming as he seemed to be in excruciating pain while the other two decided to turn heels and run. Nobody leaves. Gustav didn't even have a single shred of remorse on his face after slicing someone's arm off. Instead, he was more concerned with making sure all four of them suffered. Although both of them ran in two separate directions, Gustav went after the one he reckoned to be the gang leader first. Swoosh! He arrived in front of him in a matter of seconds. The leader of the masked cadets seemed to have expected this, and had a circular-shaped device in his hand prepared already. Beep! 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 It happened to be a said bomb, and he had already activated it. It will go off in less than 10 seconds, so you had better stay away if you don't want to be blasted to bits, he voiced out. Are you really going to kill yourself just for this? Gustav asked with a scoff. It's better than what awaits me, the leader of the masked cadets voiced out before putting the device in his uniform through the small opening at the top area. Gustav dashed forward at this point and thrust his palm forward. Bang! His palm directly slammed onto the part where the bomb was sending the cadet flying backward, but Gustav also grabbed hold of the device through the cloth a moment after he struck it with his palm. Rip! Phew-ee-I. As the cadet was sent flying, Gustav had managed to rip the bomb device out of his uniform and turn around before throwing it upwards with force. Thwai! It was already in the last seconds, but Gustav's throw allowed it to ascend over 300 feet in the air before a loud blast reverberated across the place. Boo-hoo! Even though it was quite high in the sky, they still felt the pressure below as heavy winds blew everyone's hair backward, making their uniforms flap repeatedly. Gustav dashed forward and grabbed hold of the cadet before lifting him and pulling him along. The other cadet who had gone in the opposite direction had paused for an instant after witnessing the massive explosion. Currently, he was out of the canyon and heading down the mountain on the left. Just as he wanted to keep running again, he spotted a body flying in his direction. Bang! The collision knocked him back by over 50 feet. As soon as he spotted Gustav, he headed for him with intensity. The cadet quickly spat out a yellowish shard towards Gustav. As the yellowish shard arrived in front of Gustav, he moved to the side to dodge. Still, it suddenly expanded, becoming like the size of a building in nearly an instant. Bang! It fell on Gustav with its massive weight, causing a cloud of dust to spread across the place. The cadet who had shot out the shard sighed in relief as he turned around to keep running again. He felt that even if the attack couldn't handle Gustav, it would slow him down a little. However, to his surprise, when he turned to look back, he saw the same massive building-like structure flying towards his direction from behind. Gustav had picked it up and thrown it forward. What? No way. It weighs at least 60,000 pounds. He shouldn't be able to throw it so casually. Fwye! Bang! As it landed, the cadet's screams couldn't be heard as his entire body was crushed under the weight of the massive building-like yellow shard. Chapter 469. Gustav turned to the side after noticing that the leader of the masked cadet he threw forward earlier was once again making a run for it. Swoosh! Gustav traveled towards him with speed and dodged several flying darts thrown towards him by the leader. Boom! 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 These darts exploded after reaching a particular distance. However, Gustav was still able to go through them without suffering a single injury. He arrived before the leader with his right arm arched backward, and he threw a jab straight at his face. Bang! Teeth and blood flew out of his mouth as he was sent tumbling back. Gustav dashed forward and swung his leg towards his chest once again. Bang! Bone-cracking sounds rang out this time as the cadet's chest caved in. He felt his ribs and sternum fracturing as his body catapulted through the air before he slammed into the large yellow-colored building-sized shard. His helmet had also cracked open at this point, and his face was smeared with blood as his body sunk in the massive shard. A few seconds later, the shard popped and turned into yellow dust that floated across the place. Both cadets had passed out at this point in time. The body of the one crushed underneath earlier was in a weird position that depicted a lot of his bones were already broken. Gustav was about to head towards them when a loud sound was heard in the sky. A small object could be seen cutting through the sky with speed and descending towards Gustav's position. Swai! Bam! So this is where you were at? As the dust cleared, Officer Mag could be seen standing in front of Gustav. It turned out she was the one who was flying through the sky earlier. You okay? She asked Gustav. You should be more worried about them, Gustav said while pointing at the front. She turned around and saw the state of both cadets with their mechanical black masks broken and blood-smeared faces. You sure did a lot of damage, she voiced out. These cadets took Gremlin. They almost killed him. He would have been past tense had I not arrived here as soon as possible, Gustav explained. Officer Mag had a look of understanding. Their first years, so they're not even supposed to be able to access this place. This area is quite far from the residence and really secluded. No officer would be able to notice easily that anything was happening here. She analyzed the whole situation. To her, it seemed like this had been planned perfectly, and was almost successful due to whoever was helping this group behind the scenes. I was drawn here by the explosion. Whenever there is a ripple in the gravitational field, as long as it's powerful enough, you'll sense it. The sound of the explosion was not loud enough, Officer Mag said while walking forward. She took the mechanical masks off their faces, completely revealing the looks of two cadets. By the way, how did you even find them so fast? Officer Mag asked. He brought us here with his vortex, Gustav answered. I mean, how did you know that they were in this location in particular? Officer Mag asked with a dumbfounded expression. Just a little thinking and it's easy to figure out. I have been investigating this situation for longer and also checked out these spots beforehand. Remember, I'm an officer, so I'm not restricted to places like this. Anyone with a brain would be able to figure out that they were here, Gustav explained while shrugging his shoulders. So you saying I ain't intelligent, huh? Officer Mag squinted her eyes as she voiced out while turning around to stare at Gustav. Your words, not mine. Gustav played it off with this. Officer Mag was about to say something else when they noticed E and Eldris coming from up ahead. E was carrying Gremlin on his shoulder while Eldris was pulling the female cadet and Hamlet along with him. Hamlet had already passed out from losing too much blood, and blood was still oozing out from his left empty shoulder area. They piled up the four cadets in a straight line up after removing the masks from the faces of the rest. Rena Shelby, Kurt Bills, Hamlet Kong, Jerry Richards. Officer Mag had already checked the database for the identity of these four. Just as expected, they were all normal cadets. She proceeded to feed them recovery pills so she could question them. We need to know everything about their group. Although I doubt they'll tell us, so using the brain tweak device would be best, but we can't move them to any of the labs in this condition, Officer Mag stated as she waited for their injuries to stabilize a bit. High-grade recovery pills could fix injuries in a matter of seconds, but there were grievous injuries that would take a lot of time to fully heal. Some injuries won't heal until certain medical procedures are put in place. And this mostly depends on the strength of the person who received the damage. If they were stronger, it was possible to have the injuries fixed faster. Whenever Gustav battled, he always put his opponents in such a state that their bodies could not be fully healed even after using high-grade recovery pills. They had to wait for a bit before anyone would regain consciousness. Hamlet was in a bad state due to his left arm that was chopped off entirely. "You went all out on them," Eldris chipped in. "No, I didn't. They would be dead if I did," Gustav responded. And Eldris knew we were not bragging in any way because it was true with the strength Gustav had displayed. After a few more minutes, one of them finally woke, and it was the leader of their group, Kurt Bills. The instant he noticed Officer Mag in front of him, his face paled. "Now you're going to tell me everything about your little group. Who are your other subordinates and who's the officer backing you guys?" Officer Mag went straight to point. Chapter 470. Asterisk cough cough asterisk what's the point of asking such questions when you know I won't say a thing? Kurt responded with a weak look. "Why did you fools try to frame me?" Gustav asked. "Haha, isn't that obvious? We want to bring you down so you lose your officer title. Did you forget that you have so many enemies on camp?" Kurt laughed weakly as he stated. "I pretty much figured this was the case. But I can tell there's a motive behind this little scheme of yours, and I'm pretty sure you didn't plan it neither, are you the leader?" Gustav said while squatting in front of him. "I truly am not the leader. Our leader is more powerful than you are, Gustav Crimson, and he will defeat you one day," Kurt voiced out. "I don't care about someone who can't come out and face me head on. What is the motive behind this bullshit, and who are your other subordinates?" Gustav asked with a cold look as his eyes glowed a crimson color, and fangs grew out of his mouth. "Haha, you think I'm scared? It's already the end of the road for us, you can't do nothing," Kurt voiced out as he started coughing out black blood. "What's wrong with him? There shouldn't be any more bleeding?" He voiced out from behind. Officer Mag and Gustav were also dumbfounded. Cough. 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 The others who were also unconscious began to cough as black blood trickled out the sides of their mouths. "KRRYH. KRRYH. KRRYH. Everyone was dumbfounded as they saw the 4 cadets' skins blowed up. The outline of some weird worm-looking things began to appear underneath their skins, crawling from place to place across their bodies. It appeared on their arms, legs, face, neck, and every visible part of their bodies, making the 4 cadets look grotesque. "What's happening to them?" Gustav asked with a dumbfounded expression. Officer Mag's eyes widened as she quickly grabbed hold of Gustav's hand and turned around. Surrounding all 5 of them in a bubble of gravitational force, she flew forward with Gustav, Gremlin, and Eldris. Whoosh! The body of the 4 who were left on the ground bloated to the limit, and what came next was an immense explosion. Boom! Crumble! 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 The explosion was so large that 1/4 of the mountain was blasted apart. The huge mountain on the left had now been reduced in size. This explosion had now alerted some other officers, and they started heading towards this location with speed. Officer Mag landed on the other mountain by the side with Gustav and the rest. "What in the hell was that?" He was the first to voice out as he stared in the direction of the other mountain, which still had massive chunks of rocks rolling down its side. "Looks like whoever is controlling this whole circus was more cautious than we expected," Officer Mag responded with creased eyebrows. "Leave the rest to me, kids. I don't think they'll be coming after any cadet anytime soon. This stunt they just pulled will put every officer on the alert, and they won't be able to make any move on you 4. She added. "Oh, I'm hoping they make a move on me all right." Gustav wasn't in any way satisfied with the present state of things. "Isn't it bad that they won't make any move? Won't this make it harder for them to be caught?" Eldris voiced out from the side. "No. I already have a lead, I'll catch the officer pulling strings from the shadows in a few days," Officer Mag responded. I'll still keep my eyes peeled in the meantime. The moment I notice anything strange, I'm taking action," Gustav responded before jumping off the mountain. Eldris and he followed after him. Gremlin had woken up at this time and wanted to go with them, but Officer Mag stopped him. "You're coming with me," she voiced out before flying away with him, not giving him any chance to retort. Officer Mag decided to go inspect the location of the explosion once again for any clues as other officers began to troop towards the location. 30 minutes later, Gustav, Eldris, and Timmy were on the corridor leading to their rooms discussing. Timmy explained how he was out here earlier with Gremlin when a strange force suddenly knocked him aside. The force held him there tightly, and he could hear Gremlin screaming in the background. He activated his bloodline and tried freeing himself from the hold, and just when he did, he found himself in another location. He figured he was teleported against his will. By the time he got back here, Gremlin was gone. He had tried looking for and Eldris to give them the news so they could look for Gremlin, but they were nowhere to be found. He had also been searching for Gremlin during the last hour, and had to come back here to check for Eldris and again when he met all three of them in the corridor. He was relieved to hear that Gremlin was okay, but he was really shocked after hearing about the whole situation. He never thought such a thing would happen within the camp. It was inevitable that the news about the deaths of 4 cadets would spread across the camp. This was also something the officer pulling the strings from behind would want to happen. "So what happens now?" Eldris asked. "I already have a theory about this whole thing. Once I've concluded on my investigations, I'll take action," Gustav said with a deep stare before moving towards his room. Gustav spent the rest of the day channeling his bloodline and planning his move. "I sensed a familiar energy when that explosion was about to occur," the system suddenly voiced out internally as Gustav was seated in his personal channeling room. So did I," Gustav responded. "So, do you think it's him?" the system asked. Chapter 471. "He's the only one that comes to mind. They also said he was gonna defeat me one day." Such an awfully familiar line, don't you think? Gustav chuckled at this point. "And I thought for a second that he was changing. I guess I was wrong. There is no redemption for him," Gustav added. "Why don't you keep watching him in the meantime? His punishment is gonna end in a week anyways," the system proposed. "I've issued the death battle. It's going to take place a week before I leave for my mission as long as he accepts," Gustav said with an expressionless tone. "You do know that killing him doesn't change the fact that there's still someone out there controlling a group of cadets for nefarious purposes, and can end their life in an instant if they please," the system stated. "That's none of my concern. Let the instructors handle that themselves. Endrik is more of a danger than all of the group members combined. Ending him is the main goal for me right now," Gustav responded. "You're not thinking clearly about this whole situation. For this to happen means that whoever is behind the scenes is also after you. Endrik gone doesn't mean that person is gone. They can come for you again in the future. A hidden enemy is more dangerous than a known enemy, no matter how powerful a known enemy is. If they're out in the open, you know what steps to take to neutralize them if you do your research. The same thing cannot be said about an enemy you know nothing about," the system explained lengthily. "I'm not leaving someone as dangerous as Endrik around while I'm away. I will end him this time, and whoever this hidden enemy is, I'll deal with them. Now enough of this discussion, I need to continue channeling my bloodlines." Gustav ended his statements, and closed his eyes once again. "Art, you're so dumb, don't you know you could use Endrik to uncover the rest of them?" the system voiced out before keeping quiet since Gustav ignored her last sentence, and continued channeling his bloodlines. As the days went by, Gustav stopped watching Endrik. Instead, he focused on keeping his eyes on suspicious students, so in a kind of way, he was helping Officer Mag keep an eye out for students that may be in the said group while also visiting the dungeon. Officer Mag kept him up to speed on the situation with the officer, and she mentioned that she was close to catching the culprit, and by the end of the week, she would have. On this particular day, He visited the dungeon once again with the intention of going below level 16 today. The cadets were having a display of powerful attacks in the coming week, so Gustav wanted to train well enough because he had decided to use that to take over the first position from Elevra. Currently, on the ranking, he was second place, but it would seem the rankings boards hadn't decided he was the strongest yet based on not seeing him perform any feats stronger than what Elevra had displayed. He decided that if this still didn't work, then he would have to duel with Elevra. This was something he was interested in, and so was she, but both of them were worried about going all out and inflicting incurable damage on the other. Gustav believed that if he went all out, Elevra might get killed, and with her level of strength, he couldn't be pulling punches, or he'd lose. Elevra was also worried about the same thing, but if it came down to it, Gustav didn't mind. He was interested in having the first spot before he left for his first mission. Endrik kept going to meet Officer Mag in his free time as expected, and since this was the last week, he was feeling weird as he moved towards the simulation room today. What is wrong with me? Am I actually feeling weird because my training with this woman will end this week? Endrik didn't understand what was going on with him. He entered the simulation room and memories of the last 3 months played out in his mind. Arfrg! Let me go, you cruel woman! Endrik groaned and shouted out in pain as Officer Mag sat on his back while reading a small book. Endrik was being held down by a strong gravitational force that kept increasing the more he struggled. At this point, his bones were starting to make creaking sounds due to his stubbornness. Just give in, you can't do anything about it. Officer Mag mumbled with an unbothered voice but didn't take her eyes off the book in her hand for a second. Never! Arfrg! Let me go, you witch! Endrik was still as stubborn as ever and kept struggling to free himself, even to the point of trying to use his will against Officer Mag. Your will is nothing within my gravitational field, just give it up. Stop being stubborn, you motherless prick! Officer Mag voiced out again. I have a mother! Arg! You're a witch! You're cruel! You're vile! Arg! Let me go! Endrik kept shouting out, and the gravitational force kept increasing. Now I doubt that. Officer Mag voiced out before she continued reading her book. Their mother must have been one crooked woman who lacked the skills of proper home training, Officer Mag said internally while shaking her head in pity. Arfrg! Endrik kept struggling for over 30 minutes. As time passed, his struggling screams slowly turned into painful screams and then pleading ones. At this point, nearly every bone in his body had been broken. The ground underneath had been cracked due to the force of his body pressing against it. Officer Mag sitting on his back didn't help the situation one bit. Please! I apologize! I'm sorry! Make it stop! Arg! He screamed out again as another bone in his body made loud popping sounds. He had never felt such excruciating pain in his lifetime. Remembering Gustav's last beating, he felt that didn't compare to having every bone in the body under torture. Are you truly sorry or you just want the pain to stop? Officer Mag asked as she closed her book. Chapter 472. Are you truly sorry or you just want the pain to stop? Officer Mag asked as she closed her book. I'm sorry. I apologize, Endrik pleaded. I will let you off the hook for now, Officer Mag said before standing to her feet as she deactivated the gravitational force pressing down on Endrik. Endrik moaned in relief after this action, and Officer Mag proceeded to give him a recovery pill. He slowly healed up, and when he was strong enough, he picked himself up with a look of embarrassment. You wicked bitch, how could you do that to me? He voiced out towards Officer Mag again. I'm leaving, he voiced out and turned to the side to start heading towards the entrance. However, just after taking a few steps forward, he felt immense pressure from above. This time he seemed to be ready as he quickly raised his hands and created a telekinetic wall above himself with his will. Bang! It sounded like two strong forces had collided as Endrik's knees caved the instant the gravitational force pressed down on his telekinetic wall. He groaned loudly as his knees began to lower even more, while he used every ounce of energy he could muster to hold back the gravitational force. Officer Mag slowly turned from her sitting position with the book still in her hand. She didn't look like she was even trying at all, while Hendrik currently looked like he was trying to pass a shit as his hands were still raised up and his knees kept buckling. "You really think you're something special, don't you?" Officer Mag voiced out as she closed her book. The instant the book made the slapping sound after closing, the gravitational force suddenly increased with so much intensity that Hendrik's kneecaps made snapping sounds as he fell face down while screaming in pain. Bang! The instantaneous increase of the gravitational force slammed into his entire body as the telekinetic wall he created up was destroyed. Blood splattered across the place as Hendrik's body made a small hole in the ground, and he passed out instantly. "Oh, looks like I used too much power," Officer Mag said with a contemplative tone as she retracted her gravitational force. She moved over to check on Hendrik's vitals and sighed in relief after seeing that he was still alive. She fed him recovery pills once again, and waited for him to regain consciousness. After a few more minutes, Hendrik woke up again and tried to leave once more but was swatted towards the ground and crushed like a bug under the weight of Officer Mag's gravitational force. "Understand that you're nothing special. There are many others better than you are. I could end you with ease if I wanted to," Officer Mag kept saying as she inflicted pain on Hendrik every time he tried leaving. Hours later, Hendrik had run out of energy and stared at Officer Mag like she was a beast. "You want more? I could keep going for weeks since you seem to love pain," Officer Mag voiced out as she stared at Hendrik, who was seated on the floor with a defeated look. Hendrik sat there and didn't respond as he kept staring downwards. "That's what I thought," Officer Mag said as she stood up from her seating position and moved towards Hendrik. "Now we will begin your training. You're not to leave this place for the next 1 week," Officer Mag voiced out next. "1 week?" Hendrik blurted out with a tone of disapproval. "You have a problem with that?" she asked with a glare. No. But what of the other trainings?" he asked gently after seeing her glare. "You can forget about all those for now. No instructor wants you in their training anyways," she said as she turned around. "Dang it. I won't be able to communicate with anyone," Hendrik gritted his teeth with a look of annoyance as this thought came to mind. "Your first task. Get on your knees and create a barrier around yourself using your will. I will attack it every 10 minutes using a small portion of my strength. If it gets destroyed in 1 hit, it'll crush you with my gravitational force again and heal you afterwards. Get ready to be in a lot of pain, Mr. Special," Officer Mag said before taking her to sit somewhere in the simulation room again. "How that's so easy," Hendrik scoffed as he proceeded to do as he was told. He created a circular telekinetic barrier around himself and waited for the attack. Officer Mag continued reading her book as Hendrik sat in place. 10 minutes passed, and yet Officer Mag didn't attack. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, 1 hour. "Hey, I'm still here waiting." Hendrik was starting to get impatient and shouted out. His energy was being depleted as he kept the telekinetic force, and he was tired of staying in the same position. Officer Mag ignored his exclamations and kept reading. In a blink of an eye, another hour went by, and Hendrik was already pissed at the moment. He glared daggers at Officer Mag, who still kept ignoring him. Just when he felt this might all be some kind of hoax, Officer Mag suddenly threw her book forward with immense force. Swayaya! It cut through the air like a blade as it traveled forward like a spiraling streak. Bang! It broke through Hendrik's protective barrier with ease and slammed into his face. Fwhy! The impact sent Hendrik tumbling backward as he slid across the floor. He laid in that position for a while with a defeated expression as his face turned red. "Hey, that was unfair. You said you were going to attack in 10 minutes and now it's over 2 hours. He suddenly jumped up with a look of annoyance as he voiced out. "Shut up. You had one task and you failed," she voiced out, cutting him short. "Fwye!" Bang! Immense gravitational force descended from above, smashing Hendrik to the floor once again. He screamed out in pain and pleaded, but it all fell on deaf ears. Chapter 473. After torturing him for about 20 minutes with her gravitational force, Officer Mag deactivated it and fed him recovery pills again. They went at it again when Endrick regained consciousness. He decided not to go against Officer Mag this time in fear of being punished. However, once again, Officer Mag did not stick to the time she mentioned, and he started getting angry and impatient. The next attack broke through his barrier again, and Officer Mag crushed him once more with her gravitational force. This continued for about 3 days, and Endrick kept failing to prevent the attacks from getting through even though they were quite weak. Bang! Once again, Officer Mag got him, and this time she decided to speak. You use the power of will, but not only do you lack patience, but you're also hot-headed. People with such abilities are always calm because the power of will works with mental capacity mostly bordering on focus. You are so quick to get angered and also impatient, which is why your telekinesis will never reach the full potential of its strength. It's easy to defeat you if your opponent understands your character even though they're weaker. They can prey on your immature personality and use it against you. The calmer you are, the more focused you'll be, which will strengthen your will. It's good for any fighter to know this, and you need to practice on that even more. Officer Mag voiced out lengthily, causing Endrick to show an expression of reflection. Officer Mag stared at him with one eyebrow raised before turning around. This is also why your brother will always be better than you, because during battle he knows to be calm in every situation and he doesn't even have the power of will. As this statement was voiced out, Endrick suddenly raised his head up with a look of rage in his eyes. Shum! His eyes turned completely light blue in color as the wind started circulating around him, blowing his curly hair backward. He is not better than me! Endrick voiced out with a loud tone of rage. Officer Mag turned around to look at him. Oh, did I touch a nerve? See how you're so easily triggered? She voiced out. The instant Endrick heard that, his face froze as his eyes slowly started to return to normal, and he sat back down. Now that's more like it. I understand that rage and desire also fuels will, but you'll always be on the losing end if you're not the one in control, so learn to stay calm in every situation, she said while turning around to keep moving towards her seating position again. Time out, she said after sitting. Why exactly do you get triggered by your brother? Why do you dislike your brother so much? She asked. Because he's trash. And he will always be trash. Endrick voiced out with a spiteful look as he gnashed his teeth. Officer Mag stared at him with a look of intent. So are I, he said as he calmed himself. It's all right, you're learning. Officer Mag let him off the hook this time. But we both know he's not trash, so why would you call him that? In fact, he's one of the powerful, if not most powerful, first-year cadet. Officer Mag said as she recalled everything she knew about Gustav, and even the time he purposely faked his test scores, which she was very well aware of. He's not. He didn't used to be. I am better. I was better. Endrick had a conflicted look on his face as he stuttered while speaking. Yes, we all know the story of how he went through a phase and his bloodline underwent a late evolution. Officer Mag responded. So give me a solid reason why you dislike him to the point of hate. Officer Mag requested. That's because he is stealing my spotlight. I should be the one getting praise from everyone. I should be the one getting fawned upon by these lesser mixed bloods. He used to be so weak he would hide under my shelter, and now. Endrick had to stop at this point because he realized he was already breathing in and out profusely. Silence. Officer Mag stared at him for seconds without saying a single word with a look of pity. Endrick didn't understand why she was staring at him like that, but he didn't know what to say. Everything you mentioned so far, none of them are solid. Officer Mag finally broke the silence. Endrick was about to retort, but she cut him off before he could. Maybe you missed the part where he bullied you, or you two fought a few times and he inflicted injuries on you in your younger years. Did you also miss the part where he treated you like a pile of dung? Where he insulted you or forced you to do something against your will? Officer Mag stated. Endrick's mouth opened up like he wanted to say something but couldn't find any words. That's what I thought, she added while shaking her head. Their mother must have been one demented psycho to raise a child this way. It won't be easy to change his mode of reasoning, Officer Mag thought internally. Now let's continue. Remember to be calm this time, she voiced out before giving Endrik some time to prepare his barrier. This time she waited for about 5 hours before implementing an attack, and this time Endrik was able to prevent it from phasing through. They did it several times more before she moved on to a new type of training for him. When their full 1-week isolated training ended, Endrik was already starting to act a little different. She instructed him to proceed towards this place the instant he had free time after training, and from then, their training continued. Officer Mag completely tamed Endrik in the past 3 months, making him turn completely meek in her presence. Whenever he misbehaved, she always knew just what to do to him, and occasionally, they would have talked about him and Gustav. Without knowing, he was slowly starting to relinquish the hate he had for Gustav within. Endrik's mind returned back to the present as he noticed Officer Mag's appearance within the simulation room. "Mr. Special, shall we?" she said while inviting him towards one part of the simulation room. "Why are you still calling me that?" Chapter 474. "Mr. Special, shall we?" she said while inviting him towards one part of the simulation room. "Why are you still calling me that?" Endrik asked with a slightly disturbed look. "Oh, did you forget claiming that you were special?" Officer Mag responded with a dismissive stare. "Yes, stop that, it sounds kinda obnoxious and cocky," Endrik responded with a repressed gaze. Are you sure?" Officer Mag asked. Can we just carry on with today's training, please?" Endrik proposed. Alright. Might I remind you, this torture ends for you this week just as it also ends for me. After this we can both go back to our normal livelihood within the MBO, Officer Mag announced. Oh. Yeah. A wry smile appeared on Endrik's face as Officer Mag made the announcement. Now first off, I'll check the current stage of your will, Officer Mag said while moving towards Endrik with a small device in her hand. Moving it close to Endrik, she activated it and checked what she intended to. Gustav, at the moment, was currently dealing with a group of mixed breeds within the 16th level of the dungeon. A group of 2-headed lizard men mixed breeds who breathed fire with one head and ice in the other enclosed Gustav on all sides within this underground-looking passageway that neither had an exit or an entrance. Jumping up in the air and spinning several times, Gustav landed in between 2 of these creatures and stabbed out fiercely with both palms. Poochie, the tip of his fingers coated in milky-colored energy pierced through the left and right neck of both 2-headed lizard men simultaneously. As green blood oozed down his fingertips, the creatures still seemed to be alive, although one of their heads had gone offline due to Gustav's stabbing. Zhum! Zoom! 2 pillars of fire and ice were being shot towards his location at the same time. Gustav quickly turned to the side and grabbed hold of the one on the left, putting it in front of himself. Bang! The creature was instantly burned and froze to death. Half of its body was shaped into an ice crystal as it stood in place, while the other half was roasted to ash. Gustav proceeded to grab hold of the next one by the tail and ran forward while swinging it around. Bang! 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 As the lizardmen's bodies were smashed into each other, blood was sent, spilling everywhere. Gustav made sure to dodge the rest of the fire and ice being shot out from different spots. The temperature of the place had been messed up at this point. It was both a mixture of hot and cold, but Gustav remained unaffected as he massacred the creatures one after the other. After a few more minutes, the battle ended, and all that could be seen were the scattered bodies all around the place of the lizard men. About 30 of them had attacked him all at once, and now all 30 of them had become past tense. All without a single body part completely intact. SSHHHSSS. An opening appeared on the northeast side of the massive tunnelway, and this opening had stairs that led further down. Now it's time to challenge the 17th level, Gustav muttered as he walked towards that part of the dungeon. Hours went by, and it was finally time to leave the dungeon since he still had to attend one more training session for the day. At the moment, Gustav was currently soaked in blood that included both his and the creatures he had been fighting. "Looks like 24 is my limit for now," Gustav said as he fell to the ground, laying beside the massive body of a creature that covered up to 400 feet of space. This creature had a massive hole in its body where the ground could be seen from it. It had already lost its life earlier, along with 3 more that looked similar to it scattered across the place. He still hasn't tried using the mixture of the energy from the border and the energy from the crystal he found within the mountain because he was afraid he would alert the instructors after usage. However, he had pretty much used every single ability in his arsenal to get to this level. I should be able to defeat that creature now. Gustav remembered the serpentine mixed breed within the border. He remembered just how much he had been awed that such a powerful creature existed, and he couldn't imagine how long it'd take to reach the level where he could defeat it. It had been up to 6 months since his last encounter with it, and then he could only use Yarki to bring it under control, but his attacks were still weak that they could barely cause any damage to it. He had already decided that he would find time to visit the neighborhood area after he got out of here for his first mission. Gustav stood to his feet after resting for a few seconds and dashed across the place, stabbing his hand into different parts of the creature's body. He took several internal organs of these creatures and kept them within his storage device. "Mara still needs these for her project," Gustav muttered. According to Mara, she was working on a project where she needed organs of strong mixed breeds along with a lot of other ingredients. Gustav had to share his past points with her because she ended up finishing hers while getting the ingredients needed for her experiment. Working on personal projects meant lesser free resources, which meant a cadet in the scientific field would have to use their points to purchase items they needed. Mara did this and ended up using hers completely, and still couldn't purchase everything she needed. She was quite the science freak and kept persuading Gustav that once her experiment became a success, he would be the first person to benefit from it. Chapter 475. All this was, she hoped that Gustav would assist her somehow since she was literally running short on funds. Gustav, of course, just laughed it off and told her her explanation wasn't necessary, and she could come to him for assistance at any time. Gustav started heading back towards the surface of the dungeon after taking all the necessitates needed. In 2 days, the officer who was assisting the formerly unknown group of cadets was finally caught by Officer Mag. Word spread around camp about how the instructor who killed the 4 cadets had been caught. This was one of the 3 combat instructors, Officer Kendrick. Everyone was finding it difficult to believe, mostly because he acted kind to the cadets and would even encourage some to come to see him after the training session for personal training, just like the other 2. Officer Cora was the main instructor for the combat training session, so he was asked to come in for questioning. Since Officer Kendrick was his subordinate, he was also seen as a suspect. This made Angie seriously worried because she knew just how much of a nice person Officer Cora was. He had been personally training her for months now and had never given her any reason to suspect him in any way. Gustav made his way to Commander Celia's office, hours after the news spread across the camp. He already communicated with Officer Mag to meet at the office. Minutes later, they were both in her office discussing. "How did you catch him?" Gustav asked. "How is that any of your business? Is that why you called me here?" Officer Mag said while raising one eyebrow. "Oh, I felt like he hasn't spoken or answered to any of your questions. I'm also guessing the brain-tweaking device doesn't work on him, which means y'all can't truly figure out the motive behind this situation and the other cadets involved," Gustav stated lengthily. Officer Mag's eyes showed surprise as she heard Gustav list out the situation accurately. "So I was right. Whoever that is truly behind this took a lot of precautions as expected," Gustav said internally after noticing the look on Officer Mag's face. "So?" Officer Mag asked. "Well, I have information, but how did you catch him, though?" Gustav asked again. "I set a trap and fell for it," Officer Mag stated before proceeding to narrate how it happened. She allowed a rumor to circulate where it was mentioned that Gremlin already knew the identity of the special class cadet in the unknown group. Doing this, she lured out the group again as they came after Gremlin secretively. This time Officer Mag made sure to keep her attention on the main control room within the MBO camp. There was a technological device called the Oracle. This device made it possible to check out scenarios that had gone down in any location within camp so long as the right coordinates were inputted. They mostly made use of the device when the invisible, flying cams were unable to capture an event that happened in a location due to unavailability or not being in that area. If something serious happened, they would use the Oracle to uncover the truth. However, the situation with Gustav and Vera wasn't found due to someone messing with the Oracle, causing the footage to disappear. Officer Mag had managed to lure out the group and focused on the main control room this time because she could tell that the officer involved would try to hide the activities of the group he sent out by messing with the Oracle again. This was how Officer Mag caught him. No one knew anything about her and Gustav investigating the issue in the first place, so she had been able to execute this well. So I have a list of names of suspicious cadets. I have spent the last week monitoring everyone's movements, and you'll find at least 2 or 3 of these cadets to be culprits as well, Gustav said as he passed on a holographic list to Officer Mag. When you say all, do you mean the entire first years? Officer Mag asked with an expression of disbelief. Yes. All 2,637 of them, Gustav responded. How? She asked while scrolling through the list. Now that's none of your business, is it, Officer Mag? Gustav said while proceeding to leave the office. I may be inaccurate about some of them, but I'm sure you'll be able to get a few from that list, Gustav added before leaving the office. Officer Mag was in awe. It was a list of 20 names. She knew Gustav didn't mess around with things as important as this, so she didn't doubt that he had truly spent the entire week inspecting everyone. This kid. What she didn't know was that Gustav had inputted some innocent cadet's name since he didn't want to be 100% accurate with the list. It would be suspicious if everyone on the list was truly a part of that unknown group. How Gustav achieved this was quite simple. All the time he had spent within the camp, he stored a lot of life signs. Gustav had saved the life sign of every single person in camp, the instructors included. Making use of this, Gustav would spy on the cadets and finally uncover the group. As expected, Endrik was part of them, and he happened to be the special class they were referring to. At this point, Gustav understood that the attempt to implicate him and get him to lose his officer title must have been Endrik's plan. Gustav didn't add Endrik's name to the list he handed to Officer Mag because he had decided he was going to handle Endrik himself. Endrik, this will spell your end. There's no redemption for you. Now that Gustav had found the source of the incident, he had no more mercy left in him. In his room, Endrik stood beside the window staring into space as a variety of thoughts seeped into his mind. Those idiots, I didn't expect that they would try to frame him behind my back just so they could get to delay him in camp for longer. All because that man wants me to defeat him before he makes a name for himself, Endrik sighed before moving to sit down. Should I tell him everything? Chapter 476. Those idiots, I didn't expect that they would try to frame him behind my back just so they could get to delay him in camp for longer. All because that man wants me to defeat him before he makes a name for himself, Endrik sighed before moving to sit down. Should I tell him everything? Endrik thought hard for a few minutes before shaking it off his mind. No. I can't tell him anything now till I find a way to help her, Endrik decided with a troubled look. 2 days later within a study, a man sporting long brown hair clad in an azure-colored business suit sat down listening to a large male in a black bodysuit and a mask. This man was none other than Hung Jo and his subordinate. So you're telling me that every single one of the first years with the Nanites have been singled out? Hung Jo asked. Every one of them except for Endrik. The huge man responded. How? Could Endrik have betrayed me? Hung Jo wondered out loud. Impossible. What did the others say in their report? Hung proceeded to ask. Sir, I think you're forgetting that Kendrick has been caught. The man in front voiced out. Who cares about that ant? He's very much replaceable. There are still others. I'm more concerned about how they caught up to this. Hung Zhou answered with a cold tone. The others in the shadow are also at loss about how this happened. All they could say was the whole situation turned out for the worse from the moment Gustav was target. The man explained. Gustav. Hung Zhou felt something inside him click the moment he heard Gustav's name being mentioned. Wasn't it mentioned that he met up with the camp commander, and also arrived there before they could kill the kid that was taken? Hung Zhou asked. According to the eyewitness report of the ones in the shadows, this is accurate. The man responded. That kid definitely has something to do with the uncovering of the cadets we have under our control. Hung Zhou's eyes squinted as he pointed this out. Pass the message to Endrik that he has to kill Gustav before he leaves for his first mission. He will be assisted with whatever tools he needs to complete this task. Hung Zhou instructed. What if he says no? According to the contract between you two, he doesn't have to obey your commands till after his training in the MBO. The huge man voiced out. He won't. He also despises his brother. Hung Zhou answered before reaching out to grab the tea of cup by the side. The man nodded in response and turned around to head out as Hung Zhou took a sip from the cup of tea. Refusal is not an option. They'll have to activate the nanites if he shows any form of hesitation. It was early, around 4 am in camp currently. Within a girly-looking room with pinkish decorations and concert posters, a girl could be seen laying on the bed with her eyes closed. She had silver and pink-colored hair with 2 small horns protruding out of the sides of her forehead. Pant. 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 She kept breathing in and out profusely as she turned from side to side across the bed. Huff! She suddenly sat up as her eyes sprang open with a look of fear visible within. Sweat dabbled down her face, and some were trapped on her brows and forehead. After a few more seconds of breathing in and out, Angie calmed down. She pulled the blanket from her body as she moved to the side of the bed and placed her legs on the floor. HNG! Angie suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her thighs as her legs made contact with the floor. She grabbed hold of her thighs due to reflex action, and she was wearing green tight-fitted shorts so she could see her thighs as she turned on the light. What's this? She wondered as she saw some black lines similar to the look of veins outlines on the skin displayed on her thighs. After a few more seconds, the pain disappeared along with the black lines, and her thighs returned to normal. Angie stood to her feet and moved around to confirm that her thighs were fine now. She decided to brush it off as she checked the time and sat down back on her bed. Weird dream. Angie recalled the nightmare she had a while ago. Coupling it with what she had just experienced a while back, she kept having this weird feeling of foreboding. I need to check on Gustav. Maybe I should also go for a medical checkup to be sure that everything's alright. Angie decided on how she was going to spend her free time today. Instructor Cora was still being investigated, so he would not be giving her any personal training in the meantime. Angie was going to have a lot of time to spend by herself, so she decided on how she was going to make use of it today. The day went by quite fast with the usual routine, and today was also the day Endrik's training with Officer Mag was going to end. Gustav spent his free time doing personal training while Officer Mag had one last sparring session with Endrik. Endrik had grown quite stronger in the past 3 months as well due to Officer Mag's sessions. His will was now way stronger, and he was starting to notice that he didn't easily get ticked by words anymore. This is the end, kid. You don't have to keep coming here anymore after today, Officer Mag said as their sparring session ended. Endrik mumbled with a slightly dejected expression. What's with that response? Don't tell me you'll miss all the pain I inflicted on you, Officer Mag voiced out as a smirk appeared on her face. Huh? What? Miss you? No way. Endrik quickly denied and turned around to leave. Chapter 477. Officer Mag chuckled as she saw him walk away quickly. Endrik stopped a few feet away from the entrance and spoke. Do you think I should talk to him? I don't even know how to approach him, Endrik said with a low tone. How do you feel about him now? Do you still despise him? Officer Mag asked. I don't think so, but I think he despises me. Endrick responded. Well, unlike him, you actually did some despicable acts to him back in the days, but I'm sure it's nothing you two can't sort out. You should go with the intention of tendering an apology, Officer Mag advised. They'll try, Endrick said before he continued walking forward. Just as he got to the entrance, he paused once again before turning around. Thank you, he said while bowing slightly before turning around to leave through the entrance. Officer Mag nodded slightly in response before walking towards a part of the simulation room. Gustav and Angie met later in the day in one of the training facilities. Within a room that was simulated to look like a jungle, both of them stood opposite each other discussing. Are you planning something? Angie asked. What do you mean by planning something? I'm always planning everything, Gustav asked and responded to his own question with a strong tone. I know. Not that. I mean, are you planning anything big? Angie asked while rolling her eyes. Do you mind specifying? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow. The 4 cadets losing their lives was attributed to you and them being in an unknown group. It was said that a battle broke out between you and them, and then that happened. That's something big which looks like something you'd have been planning for a while, Angie said with a suspicious gaze. Oh, that I didn't actually plan that, it just happened. So your definition of big is you asking if I'm going to be killing anyone soon, right? Gustav asked. Angie kept staring at him with a gaze of confirmation. Oh yeah? Of course I am, Gustav responded casually. What? Who? Angie asked with a tone of worry. That has nothing to do with you. Why did I even agree to meet you? We're not on talking terms, remember? Gustav said. Because she's the love of your life, remember? The system suddenly chipped in within him. Shut it, Gustav responded internally before turning around. Angie suddenly held Gustav's arm to stop him from leaving. Please wait. I just have a very bad feeling recently. Tell me who you're planning to kill, Angie requested. Gustav turned to the side to stare at her briefly before pulling his arm from her grip forcefully. Someone that should already be gone if not for your silly interference, Gustav responded before walking away. Angie's eyes closed slightly as she heard that and stared at Gustav walking away. Endrick. Just as I thought. My nightmare. This made Angie recall her nightmare, which made her really worried, but after thinking about it for some time, she brushed it off. Gustav won't lose to Endrick no matter what, she said internally, calming herself. Endrick had already arrived back in his room at this time and was currently sitting on his bed, coming up with lines to say. Hey bro. I apologize for all those years it was because. Hey Gustav. It's my fault for not being. Hey man. I joined others in harming you. Arg, I can't come up with anything. Endrick slapped his forehead as he fell back on his bed with a frustrated look. After a few more minutes of contemplation, he sat up once again. I think I got something now, Endrick muttered as he started formulating a new line in his mind. Just as he wanted to speak again, he heard a knock at the door. He walked up to it and opened it, only to find a small box placed in front. He bent to pick up the box and brought it inside after closing the door. He opened it up, and a holographic image of a message suddenly appeared. Have a death match with Gustav before he leaves for his first mission, and kill him. Any tool or gadget you need for this task to be executed successfully will be provided for you. Young Joe. As Endrick read the message, his face creased up. You bastard. I will only kill who I want to. I don't have to obey your commands till after my training here, Endrick voiced out with a tone of annoyance, as the box lifted into the air and got crushed by an invisible force. Fwye! Its remaining parts flew towards the wall, slammed into it, and fell to the floor. This message threw Endrick off, and he started prancing around the room as thoughts started appearing in his mind. The next week came, and it was finally time for the cadets to display their most powerful attacks to the group of inspectors who were being sent by the higher-ups within the MBO. Today was devoid of any training because different settings had been made for the cadets to show their strength. It was like a test, but it wasn't really a test. The higher-ups were only there to see their improvement. The cadets had been waiting for this, since this was also a chance for them to prove their strength had truly increased. The inspectors were not really concerned about who was the strongest, because this wasn't the purpose of coming to inspect today. They were more concerned about those with the best improvements among all cadets, and there was a particular way this would be graded. There was also a chance of normal cadets becoming special class through this if their improvement was seen as one of the best in camp. Gustav moved towards the display location along with Eldris, Falco, Team E, and Rhea. The place where the display would be held was different from what they had expected. It wasn't anything like a stadium or a battle ring. Instead, it was more like a city. Chapter 478. The place where the display would be held was different from what they had expected. It wasn't anything like a stadium or a battle ring. Instead, it was more like a city. The cadets and the investigators spectating had a facility within this city-like place where they all stayed. Apparently, it was a city created for tests and training within the MBO. It was fairly large, with residential and business buildings positioned all across the place. Gustav and the others arrived there on time. They took their seat in the facility, which happened to be a kind of tower situated behind the city. There was a massive transparent wall in front of the seating area where everyone could see the city from their seating position. There were also projections that displayed different parts of the small city as well. The 4 inspectors from the higher-ups sat at the northwest corner within the facility clad in ash and red-colored uniform, which showed that their ranks were higher than that of all the instructors. As every first-year cadet arrived, one of the instructors moved to the front as the event began. "I will now explain your tasks for today," Instructor Bryant voiced out as he gestured at the city in front. "This is a city just like in the outside world, built only for the purpose of training an event like this. You all will be tasked with protecting different sections of this city in front," Instructor Bryant explained as he gestured towards the city. Chatter. 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 The place turned a little noisy as Officer Bryant got to that point, because some of the cadets were wondering why Officer Bryant was mentioning protection when they were prepared to display their most powerful abilities. "Whatever section of the city you're tasked with protecting has to be kept safe while you attack whatever threatens its safety." As Officer Bryant reached this point, a holographic image of a black round metallic-looking ball writhing with electricity appeared in the air for everyone to see. "You are to destroy this before it lands in the city. Every ball has a particular amount of force, strength and thickness, and it increases in these stats the more you destroy. If a ball eventually manages to drop on that section of the city where you're meant to protect, you will be scored based on how many you manage to destroy." As Officer Bryant got to this point, the cadets had looks of understanding on their faces. "You're not allowed to help another cadet deal with their section, and you're meant to control the force of your attack to make sure your assigned section of the city is not damaged because of you," Instructor Bryant added. After all this was said, the cadets waited for their names to be called one after the other. According to Instructor Bryant, only 500 cadets could be assigned to city sections at a time, so there would be different batches. The special class cadets were not going to be among these batches because, according to the inspectors, they wanted the special class cadets to be assigned to 2 different sections of the city at the same time. They also wanted to focus specifically on the special class when they were performing this task, unlike the normal cadets. The latter was about 500 in number going at a time. They obviously wouldn't be able to notify everyone. They also felt the special class cadets should always be made to do more. The 500 cadets whose names were called moved forward as expected, and were teleported to different parts of the city. As they arrived on the section they were meant to protect, they looked around. There were about 18 buildings in the vicinity, and light could be seen coming out of the drawn structure on the ground that surrounded these 18 buildings, forming a kind of rectangular barricade. This depicted that the section ended where the lights were located, and the buildings and roads were meant to be protected. Each section was like a small street. Some were lucky to find themselves in residential areas with small-sized buildings. In contrast, the unlucky ones found themselves amidst high-rise buildings like skyscrapers. Those who found themselves in areas with high-rise buildings started making their way to the top of one of the buildings. This was mostly because it was easier for the balls to hit one of the buildings if they remained at ground level. They felt they would be able to react better if they were on higher ground. A few minutes after the cadets had arrived at their sections, Officer Bryant announced the beginning of the event. They all became alert after the announcement, and prepared to attack. Shroom! 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 A few seconds later, everyone could hear loud sounds coming from the sky like something was traveling through it at a fast speed. They looked up, and in the next few moments, massive black balls started raining from the sky. They descended towards different locations in the city with force and speed. It looked as if meteors were descending from outer space with the speed at which they were moving. Those who had noticed one coming towards their section of the city prepared to attack. The moment it reached points where they knew their attacks could reach, the cadets began sending out attacks simultaneously. Boom! 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 Different kinds of attacks were sent into the sky, and sounds of explosions rang out across the place with every collision. In a few seconds the skies had been cleared, and everyone had managed to destroy the balls before they could land in their section of the city. Not every section was attacked in this first round since it was random, but everyone was still on the alert as they waited for the next round. The skies still had smokes and some kind of coloring due to the massive number of attacks sent out earlier. Chapter 479. Within the facility where the other cadets and instructors and the inspectors were gathered, a board had already appeared on the side of the large hall. It displayed scores of the cadets that were currently in different sections of the city. A few moments later, the same sound as earlier could be heard as the clouds burst apart, revealing more of those black balls. The cadets who found themselves on tall buildings moved away from their current location to another part because the ball's trajectory was different from where it was headed for the last time. They quickly jumped several buildings and stared up towards the arriving black ball that was the size of a boulder. Attacks were once again sent upwards: electricity, fireballs, energy attacks, fist strikes, and so many different ones. As long as the force of their attack was enough, once the force collided with the ball, it exploded. The balls exploded when they received a particular amount of damage which prevented fragments from falling towards the buildings in the sections. This way, protection was easier as long as the cadet was powerful enough. This continued for about 10 minutes, and every new round, the balls were always faster and stronger than the initial. As time passed, the cadets' attacks were beginning to become less and less effective. Some of them would have to attack the same ball about 3 to 4 times before totally getting rid of it. Boom! A section of the city was incinerated as one of the balls landed on a building, causing ripples of destruction to spread across the place. The cadet had failed to stop it even after attacking it several times. Luckily, the supervisors teleported him the instant the ball made contact with one of the buildings. More and more cadets were unable to stop the balls after this. The first ended after stopping about 9 balls. The 9th ball was considered to be 6 times stronger than the first and 3 times faster in speed, which meant the cadet did quite well, but he was still embarrassed that he was the first to fail. Other cadets failed to stop the ball in their 10th to 13th round, and only a single cadet managed to reach the 14th round before failing. Minutes later, all 500 cadets were back in their seats after being teleported back to the facility. They all stared at the holographic projection that displayed their scores as Officer Bryant started mentioning the names of the next set of cadets. The inspectors who had witnessed the first batch all had poker faces because, to them, the performance of the normal cadets was already expected, even though this batch of cadets did better than the last. The holographic projection had a side that showed that it was calculating the improvement rate of every cadet from the first batch. It displayed their most powerful attacks when they were just getting into the MBO, and the ones they had displayed a while ago. The supervisors teleported the next batch of cadets one after the other again. They found themselves in different sections of the city just like the previous ones. They began to also showcase their strength as the balls descended from above. About 2 hours later, every single normal class cadet had shown the strength of their attacks and had been teleported back. On the holographic projection that displayed scores of cadets, their improvement rate was also displayed by the side. Some of them had improvement rates of 400 to 500%. Some around 600 to 700%, and the highest were bordering between 750 to 800%. Ria was the only normal cadet who had managed to reach a whopping sum of 900% improvement rate since his start in the MBO. It was already high to get an improvement rate of 700% as a cadet that was already quite strong on entering into the MBO. Talk more of getting 200% higher than that. The inspectors had their eyes on Ria and two other normal cadets after seeing their improvement rate. After all, they were mostly invested in the improvement rate than the scores. The improvement rate was calculated based on how much stronger a cadet had become since their arrival here, which meant Ria was 7 times stronger than he used to be. If Ria happened to be the person with the highest improvement rate, this didn't make him the strongest. This only showed that his rate of improvement is better and higher than the rest. Now it was finally time for the special class cadets to be transported into the city. Since they were only around 60 in number, they would be spaced across the city properly. And it was crazier for them since they had to handle the safety of 2 sections instead of 1 like the others. As Gustav was teleported away, he found himself in a part of the city that had both residential and business structures. Unlike the usual 18 buildings, there were close to 40 buildings in the vicinity. Some were as large as a high-rise, and others were small in size, like bungalows, 2-story and 3-story buildings. Gustav walked in the middle of the empty street, looking around. The buildings were so well structured, and he could even see within some buildings that there were furniture and other necessities for living there. It seemed as if the MBO missed no detail except for the lack of human life within the vicinity. This was understandable since the MBO wouldn't want to endanger anyone's life. Gustav looked up ahead towards the southeast and noticed the tall bluish mast shooting up to the sky. There were high-rise buildings in the area that were 200 to 300 stories tall, but the mast happened to be taller than them, reaching over 3,000 feet. Gustav moved forward and arrived in front of it. SSHHHMMMM. A certain kind of energy began to circulate around him as he descended to a particular point, crouching his knees a little. Super jump has been activated. His calves bulged immensely as the ground underneath his feet cracked just before he leaped upwards with force. Thump. Chapter 480. Super jump has been activated. His calves bulged immensely as the ground underneath his feet cracked just before he leaped upwards with force. His body ascended upwards like an ignited rocket shooting past 1,000 feet in a matter of a few seconds. The sound of the air being torn through as he traveled upwards with speed caused every other special class cadet in the vicinity to stare upwards towards that particular location. After ascending up to over 2,000 feet in height, Gustav grabbed a part of the mast and pulled himself upwards again. Zoom! In a few seconds he ascended above the mast and landed on its tip. There was barely any room for movement at the top of the mast, so Gustav stood in place and squatted while looking around. Except for the high-rise buildings, other buildings in the vicinity looked like Lego toys to him right now. The position of the mast wasn't accurately positioned in the middle of the 2 sections Gustav was assigned to, but it was very close to being in the middle. Gustav could see every single building within the 2 sections from his current position. He could even see other special class cadets sections. Those whose sections weren't too far away from Gustav's could see him standing at the top of the mast. Some of them who found themselves in sections that only had high-rise buildings also made their way to the top of a building. In a few more moments, everyone was prepared for the task to begin as they all stood in their desired locations staring at the sky. Officer Bryant announced the start, and just like the previous batches, these gigantic black balls began to fall from the sky. The size of the first black ball caused the spectators to be surprised due to the size being larger than the ones the normal cadets had to destroy, and the speed at which it fell. Gustav noticed the one headed towards the section he was supposed to protect was heading for the high-rise building towards his far right about 200 feet away. However, it was falling in a diagonal format from the left, so he had decided to attack it without moving from his current spot. Gustav waited as he activated God Eyes to stare at the massive ball falling from the sky and make his calculations properly. Size manipulation has been activated. The moment the ball was close to flying over the mast, Gustav activated size manipulation and threw his fist upwards with force. Zoom! His entire right arm extended in length, shooting upwards with force, and just as it reached a particular height, the massive ball falling from the sky happened to appear above it. Bang! Boom! A massive sound of collision rang out, followed by an explosion as the ball exploded into bits and pieces, raining dust across the place. Gustav's extended fist began to retract after the collision. At this point, other special class cadets were also sending forth their attacks. He opened a small vortex in front of himself and punched outwards. His fist appeared right in the air beside the falling ball, slamming into it and crushing it in the process. Dark Falco slashed his claws towards the sky, causing crescent-shaped dark energy to travel forward, severing the ball in two before it landed on the ground. Other special class cadets also made use of their abilities, destroying the first wave of falling balls in a matter of seconds. Even though the first balls that were sent downwards were relatively stronger than the first ones sent downwards for the normal cadets, the special classes had managed to destroy them with ease. The second round came, and the special class cadets once again displayed their abilities by destroying the balls with ease. The spectators witnessing had awe-stricken faces as they watched the performance of the special class cadets. 30 minutes went by, and not a single special class cadet had failed to stop any of the balls. Each of them had displayed how spectacular they were in managing their energy and using powerful attacks. Although this didn't mean the weaker ones weren't already running out of energy, but lasting this long was something none of the normal cadets were able to manage, even when they only had to protect just one section. As another round of balls descended, Gustav leaped upwards from the top of the mast towards the southeast part of the sky. He arched his arm backwards with force and threw it forward as he arrived in front of the ball. Bang! Boom! As the ball exploded after the collision, his body phased through the explosion, traveling further forward. Zwee-eye! This was when he noticed the second ball headed towards the eastern part of the double section he was protecting. Landing on the top of one of the high-rise buildings, Gustav dashed forward with intense speed. Swoosh! The instant he arrived at the edge, he leaped upwards. Thump! His body traveled across the air as he leaped over the streets and landed on the top of the next building. Gustav turned towards the right side and dashed forward before leaping upwards again. His body traveled across the air, flying over about 4 tall buildings before landing in the middle of one of the residential areas. Bam! Due to the height at which he leaped, landing on the ground caused a cloud of dust to scatter across the place. The second ball, which was only about 400 feet in the air at the moment, could be seen up ahead. Gustav leaped upwards again and swung his right leg forward in midair. Bang! The ball was immediately blasted to pieces as he phased through the explosion and landed on the balcony of a 2-story building in front. This wasn't only happening in his area. Other special class cadets were also handling the same issue where they had to deal with 2 balls falling towards their sections simultaneously. A showdown between 2 people is gonna be happening soon, smiley face. Chapter 481. This wasn't only happening in his area. Other special class cadets were also handling the same issue where they had to deal with 2 balls falling towards their sections simultaneously. Other special class cadets were also able to handle theirs. In some sections, the second ball fell later than the first. Gustav and only a few special class cadets were exceptions. Dashing through the streets, Gustav arrived back at the middle of both sections he was protecting. Other special class cadets at this point were already on the alert after that happened. So they were ready to destroy more than one in the next round. Back in the facility, the inspectors happened to be speaking to one of the instructors. "How tough are the current balls?" The one with the diamond-shaped head asked. "Currently half the toughness of steel," the instructor answered. Turn it up the notch. I want to see how powerful the attacks of first-year special class can be," another inspector instructed. Gustav and the others suddenly noticed that in the next round, the toughness of the balls suddenly increased by several levels. Those who were still using less powerful attacks had been taken by surprise and nearly failed to destroy the balls before they landed in their section. Since the toughness increased, they had to attack the same ball more than once due to the attacks. Gustav finally used the atomic disintegration blade, throwing it towards the ball on the other end of the section, while destroying the one in front of him. Due to the partially long distance between both balls, the other ball didn't get destroyed in one go after the atomic disintegration blade collided with it. Gustav had to move towards that side as well with speed and destroy it. On Angie's side of the city, it had been relatively easy for her to move around all this time due to her speed. Once again, she dashed up the surface of a high-rise building and jumped towards the side while thrusting her right leg forward. Bang! The massive ball twice the size of a boulder was immediately blasted to pieces as she traveled straight to the building on the other side and slammed into the window. Bam! Krryhhh. Shards of glass were sent flying across the place as she landed inside the office building on the 234th floor and rolled on the floor repeatedly before coming to a stop. Standing to her feet, there wasn't a single scratch on her body, but she had prevented both balls from making contact with the part of the city she was supposed to protect. Angie looked around with a slightly disturbed expression on her face before finding her way to the elevator and moving to the top of the building. In other parts of the city, the special class cadets were starting to have a hard time dealing with two balls at once, especially when their toughness had gone up by a lot. It was only a matter of time before the weaker ones got evicted. He on his side was having a lot of fun bringing the two balls together. He would open up vortexes causing both balls to appear in the same spot far above the sections of the city he was supposed to protect and destroy them both in one fell swoop. Even when the dark balls became tougher to destroy, only a few special class cadets could handle it to this point without breaking a sweat. Elevra, since the start, hadn't even bothered using two hands. She had one hand behind her back all this time as she moved from place to place across her city while destroying them with a single attack. Eldris hadn't bothered opening his eyes. He could still handle the two balls falling at the same time without using too much power. Chad had two gigantic blood creatures positioned in different parts of the sections he was protecting. They each had massive club-like blood weapons in their hands which they used in dealing with balls that were headed towards their vicinity. Chad didn't have to put in a lot of work due to this. He just sat down at the top of a building with a bored-looking expression. As expected, after about 5 more rounds, 3 special class cadets failed to stop a ball. The supervisors teleported them back to the facility the instant it made contact with one of the buildings in the city. They had managed to clear about 47 rounds, which was way higher than the highest normal cadet, but they were still embarrassed for being the first to fail. As more rounds passed, more and more special class cadets began to get evicted from the city after failing to stop one of the balls. In the next 20 minutes, only about 15 special class cadets were left. At this point, Gustav was still destroying the balls without any form of transformation, even though they were now tougher than steel. Shroom! 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 The next round, the sound from the sky intensified, and the special class cadets that were still left noticed 3 of these massive black balls headed for their sections. The spectators' eyes widened slightly as they also noticed it. Combination has been activated, Sprint plus Super Jump. Gustav combined these two, and he leaped upwards with full force. Thump! The entire mass vibrated as his body ascended into the sky, and he found himself closing in on the first black ball. Bluish tattoo-like glows began to appear all over Gustav's arm. His muscles bulged intensely while he pulled his arm backwards with force. Throwing his fist forward, a loud sound of collision rang out as it made contact with the ball, causing the bluish energy to gather around it. The ball didn't get destroyed in one hit, but instead of Gustav attacking it again, he somersaulted severally in midair before landing on it and leaping forward towards the direction of the next ball. The instant his legs separated from the body of the ball, there was a massive explosion. Boom! Bluish energy filled the sky as Gustav's body traveled towards the next ball. Chapter 482. Boom! Bluish energy filled the sky as Gustav's body traveled towards the next ball. Gustav arrived in front of the next ball, which was still over 5,000 feet in the air. Bang! Gustav punched it so hard, it traveled across the air and slammed into the third ball in the distance. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A milky-colored blade of energy was formed in Gustav's hand, which he threw forward with force as he descended from the air. Sweeve! The blade repeatedly spiraled across the air as it found its way to both balls and cleaved them in half accurately after making contact. Boom! An explosion followed afterwards, and Gustav repeatedly spun in the air as he descended to control the direction of his falling body. Bang! He landed on the top of a high-rise building towards the west, causing it to vibrate intensely from the heavy landing. While Gustav was dealing with his 3 balls, the other special classes were also trying their best to destroy all before they landed. Angie swept across another building after destroying the first ball as another horn grew from her forehead, and her speed became so fast only a silver line could be seen. Leaping into the air, Angie did a somersaulting kick as she ascended. Bang! Her leg collided with the ball, stopping its descent in midair and causing it to slightly travel upwards as Angie started descending from the air. Landing on another high-rise building, she dashed forward with immense speed, crossing a distance of 4,000 feet in a single second. Whitish energy began gathering around her as she once again ran up another high-rise building and leaped into the air. She was currently headed for the third ball. As she ascended over 1,000 feet above the skyscraper, Angie released the energy surrounding her. Shroom! Boom! A loud sound of explosion traveled across different sections of the city as the ball was disintegrated completely by the whitish waves of energy. Angie's body descended once again, and she started moving towards the other ball she didn't destroy in one go earlier. She was able to get to it in time and destroy it. On Glade's side, she conjured up hundreds of sickles in midair and flung them outwards. He was still having fun bringing all 3 balls together to destroy them in one fell swoop. Even though they were now tougher than earlier since he was able to easily make contact with them, destroying them before they reached his section of the city was very plausible. Eldris finally opened his eyes at this point, and everything around him turned black and white as he traveled towards the second ball. A single touch made the black ball lose its color. The black on the ball was sapped away and covered Eldris' right hand. The instant he punched at the ball, it was blasted to smithereens easily. After doing this, he didn't even need to move to the next one. His beautiful eyes stared in the direction of the next black ball, and then the blackness covering the ball started swirling. Eldris appeared on the ball the next instant as the blackness covering it disappeared, and he destroyed it just like the one before. Dash. Oh my gosh, what is that ability? Dash. Eldris had functioning eyes all these time? Dash. How is he doing all that? The spectators were surprised after seeing Eldris use the power of his eyes for the first time. Elevra, on her end, dashed across the sky like she wasn't affected by gravity, as a purplish glow surrounded her palms. A single palm strike sunk into the ball, destroying it from the inside out. She still seemed to have a lot of energy as she moved to the next ball to destroy it as well. Timmy, Matilda, Glade and 3 more special class cadets failed to stop one of the balls in this round and were teleported back to the facility. At this point, only around 9 special class cadets were left, and these were the most powerful special class cadets among the first years. Vera had been teleported back to the facility about 2 rounds back. He still felt like he had enough energy to spare him for only a few more rounds, although he was quite unbothered. He felt he had already done enough. Dark Falco was also running out of energy, as well as Chutlu. Minutes went by, and he finally decided to drop out after feeling his energy nearly running out. He had opened so many vortexes and even controlled the movement of the balls so many times, which caused him to expend a lot of bloodline energy, mostly due to the size of the balls. Destroying the ones in the last one, 2 were no easy feat due to their toughness. Falco also dropped out at this point with 3 more special classes. At this point, only Elevra, Gustav, Eldris and Chad were left. Eldris and Chad could continue to destroy as many balls that came in the next round if they didn't run out of energy. Still, Eldris was expending a lot of energy by keeping his eyes open. His eyes were literally distorting the reality around him, and it cost a lot of energy to keep going. If he didn't have an A-grade bloodline, he would have run out of energy by now. Elevra was still hanging on like she wasn't even bothered by the challenge. Chad and Gustav were the only ones making use of brute force alone to destroy the balls. Chad still had it easier because of his blood creatures, but he was still spending a lot of energy. 3 more rounds went by, and none of them had backed out yet. Elevra and Eldris were still destroying the balls in 1 or 2 attacks, while Gustav and Chad still had to attack the balls 2 or more times to completely destroy them. This made it look as if Chad and Gustav would drop out soon, but they still went on for about 5 more rounds. Chapter 483. At the 57th round, where each ball's size was almost as large as a bungalow building, Chad and Eldris failed to stop one of the 3 balls after running out of bloodline energy. Chad stared in the direction of Gustav's section, where he could see him soaring in the sky after destroying a ball just before he was teleported away. How is he still destroying them with a casual expression? Chad gritted his teeth in frustration after arriving back in the facility. Eldris closed his eyes back as he took his seat beside Falco, Timmy and Rhea. The other cadets in the vicinity, especially the females, stared at him with a fawning expression. Now that they had witnessed his eye abilities, they believed he could still go toe-to-toe with the number 1 and 2. Although it wasn't guaranteed that he would win, they had seen now that his abilities were sophisticated. He was more powerful than they thought. Chad and the others also received stares of adoration, but after hearing the sound of the explosion from the direction of the city, everyone turned to face the holographic monitors again. Now that practically everyone had dropped out of the challenge, only the 2 most powerful first-year cadets were left. Everyone focused on this since they had wanted to know who was more powerful among the 2. They had never had a proper battle with each other, and every fight Gustav had always made them rethink if he was weaker or stronger than Elevra. So those 2 are Gustav and Elevra. I have heard reports of them as well, and their performances are fascinating. No first years, regardless of whether or not they're special class, should be able to come this far, yet they did. I'm interested in seeing how far they can go. At the inspector's corner, the inspectors were intrigued and interested in seeing how far Gustav and Elevra would go. Back in the city, Gustav and Elevra had successfully destroyed the balls again. At this point, they could see each other from the distance as Gustav stood at the top of the mast. She had to use more than 2 attacks to destroy a ball now due to the intense toughness, but she was still fast enough to get to the 3 of them like Gustav. She was 7 sections to the west, but Gustav could see her clearly due to God eyes while seeing his outline at the top of the mast. Her eyes squinted as a smile appeared on her face. It had to be you. Gustav smiled back. Game on. Combination has been activated. His body began to transform as he grew up to 7 feet in height with a large muscular frame and black-colored thick skin. Fangs grew out of his mouth along with horns, and sharp claws protruded from his fingertips. Elevra could feel the immense increase in energy waves from her location as she stared in Gustav's direction on the mast. Then it'll get serious too, Elevra said internally as she pulled the head tie from her head, revealing the closed eye on her forehead. A purplish glow covered her entire frame, causing the vicinity to tremble. She stepped forward after noticing the balls descending from the sky once again. Even the buildings around her trembled due to the forceful twist and turn of the space surrounding her, created by the energy she had just unleashed. Gustav also sensed the increase in energy from his location and nodded. She truly is powerful. But today is the day I take the first spot on the rankings, Gustav said as he leaped upwards with force. Thum cracks appeared at the top of the mast as his feet separated from them, causing the entire thing to tremble with force. Gustav raised his leg up as he traveled up like a rocket bang. He destroyed the first ball and repeatedly spiraled in the air, increasing the speed of his descent as he landed on a high-rise building. Opening his mouth, Gustav shot out waves of sonic energy towards the next ball, causing it to halt in the air for a second before completely disintegrating it. At this point, Elevra had also jumped upwards to deal with her balls as well. The spectators watched with widened eyes as Gustav and Elevra displayed a new level of strength, destroying all the balls that came for the next 10 rounds. Everyone was now convinced that no other cadet could come close to their level of strength and energy, considering how they kept making use of powerful attacks. The eye on Elevra's forehead opened up as she stood at the top of a building. Purplish and dark energy gathered around it before it shot out. Shuzham! A beam of penetrative energy shot through the clouds, destroying all 3 balls, falling towards her side of the city in one fell swoop. Gustav dealt with his using sonic screams and physical punches, which always destroyed them. He still hadn't made use of some other abilities, but he was okay with these abilities handling the job for now. These two continued with the destruction for another 5 rounds, and even the inspectors couldn't believe their eyes and kept asking if they were truly first years. However, both of them were slowly running out of energy. Even though Elevra was very powerful, she didn't have unlimited energy. The next round arrived, and this time 4 massive dark balls the size of bungalow buildings shot out of the sky. Before Gustav and Elevra could attack, something happened. A force of attraction suddenly pulled the 4 balls together, and the instant they collided, they began to merge. The 4 balls in the sky, both in Gustav's and Elevra's sections, merged, and 2 massive balls were created. One headed for Gustav's section while the other headed for Elevra's. These balls were the sizes of a small mountain. No one could imagine how tough they'd be. The speed at which they descended, coupled with their sizes, generated a massive amount of wind that Gustav and Elevra felt from their position below. Chapter 484. The speed at which they descended, coupled with their sizes, generated a massive amount of wind that Gustav and Elevra felt from their position below. The spectators were astonished by the size and didn't doubt the amount of force these balls were carrying was humongous. The balls cast a huge shadow across the sections of the city. Gustav's entire frame suddenly combusted and became covered in reddish-brown flames as he leaped upwards. Dash. What? He can use flames too? Dash. Is this another ability of one of his transformations? The spectators were wowed by seeing these flames on Gustav's being as he shot upwards towards the massive ball. Elevra slammed one of her legs on the ground and ascended by over 1,000 feet in barely a few moments. Her fists were covered by a purplish glow as she arched her right arm downwards before throwing it up with force. Threya! She and Gustav happened to hit both balls simultaneously, causing a loud sound similar to that of a thunderclap to ring out. The red-hot fire spread from the point of impact where Gustav's punch landed, but the ball was only affected by being pushed upwards by a few feet. It was still sturdy. The same happened with Elevra, but both of them weren't done. They continued ascending in the air and kept throwing out punches upwards at the balls. Bam! 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 Cracks had already spread to different parts of the balls after they punched them several times. However, it was still far from getting destroyed. Gustav was affected by gravity, so he started falling back to the ground in a few, but as he fell, he raised his head upwards and shot out another sonic scream. Scree! The sonic waves rammed into the gigantic ball again, but only held it in place for a few seconds before it started descending again. Over at Elevra's side, she floated in midair as the purplish energy still surrounded her figure and kept striking the massive ball with her palm. She was like an ant in front of the ball, but every one of her strikes made a tremendous impact. After floating for a few more seconds longer than Gustav, her body began to descend, and the dark eye on her forehead once again shot out the purplish and dark beam. Shuzhamzim! Bang! Her entire frame was pushed down faster as the beams slammed into the ball and kept ramming at it. From the spectators' angle, they saw Elevra land on a high-rise building and kept firing out the purplish beam. The ball was suspended in the air. Due to the force the beam was emitting and Elevra's body being used as support, cracks began to appear underneath her feet. Krryhh! The cracks spread to every part of the massive rooftop and continued to worsen as she kept it up. However, before the top of the high-rise building could give way, more cracks appeared on the massive ball, casting its looming shadow above the city. Krryyhhh. Boom! A loud explosion followed afterwards that sent shockwaves all across the place. Fwooah! Elevra slid back a little due to the immense force of the wind generated after the explosion in the sky. Meanwhile, on Gustav's side, his arm grew to the size of 10 feet, became extremely muscular and massive as his body shot upwards once more. His head transformed into that of the serpentine mixed breed as he shot out greenish energy towards the ball, and swung out his massive hand towards it as well. Bang! Bang! The cracks increased as the greenish energy slammed into it. Still, it didn't get destroyed yet until Gustav's massive right hand made contact. Bang! His hand shot straight through its toughness, causing chunks to fall out just before. Boom! It exploded into smithereens. Both of them had managed to deal with this, which had shocked the spectators a lot because they thought this was the end for them both after seeing the size of the balls. Just when everyone thought this was where the challenge would end, 2 more balls that happened to be the same size as the ones they had destroyed appeared once more. Elevra felt like she hadn't even had time to catch her breath, and they were sending out another one. I should still have enough energy to destroy this one. They'll do it fast, she said internally before leaping upwards once more. Gustav also noticed this and was about to leap upwards as well to handle it when he sensed something. Feel him! Another ball suddenly appeared above his, crashing down with more speed than the first one. Elevra, who was close to the first ball, suddenly noticed this as well, but before she could react, both balls collided and started moving downwards with even more intensity than before. Bang! Elevra was crashed into in the next moment, as both balls pushed her downwards while descending. Gasped the spectators could see her body glued to the bottom of the first ball as the second ball stacked on it, and both descended with immense force. It looked as if she had passed out. Meanwhile, on Gustav's end, he checked out his remaining energy points. Energy: 7,000/15,000. I should spend at least 3,000 energy points if I try this, Gustav thought as he activated size manipulation. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav leaped downwards towards the street as his entire frame started increasing in size. At first, the spectators watching were wondering what he was up to, but in the next moment, looks of astonishment were written all over their faces. Gustav grew past the height of 500 feet and kept growing. In a few moments he was taller than 1,000 and kept growing bigger. 300 EP, 300 EP, 300 EP, 300 EP. He kept getting system notifications about his depleting energy points as he kept growing taller, but he wasn't done yet. The residential buildings in the sections continued to get smaller in his point of view as the skyscrapers in the vicinity didn't look so big anymore. Chapter 485. He stopped after reaching a height close to 3,000 feet. At this point, up to 4,000 energy points had been spent, but Gustav didn't feel any regrets because this was like an experiment for him. Although, he knew he couldn't maintain this form for too long, or he'd be out of energy in no time. The spectators were astonished as they saw the massiveness. He was taller than all the buildings in the vicinity currently, and his dark beast-like combination transformation was still on. Gustav raised his hands up as both balls kept descending like he wanted to catch them. The instant they reached his hands, he grabbed hold of them tightly. Boom! A loud sound rang out as his massive feet sunk into the ground, creating a small pit due to the size and force of trying to stop both balls. Gustav groaned intensely as his arms lowered and his muscles budged from the heavily. The balls were still pushing him down, but he groaned out as he stood in place. After a few seconds, he was able to stop both balls and separate them before holding one in his hands each. Meanwhile, on Elevra's side, she had finally opened her eyes. She shot out the most penetrative and most powerful beam since the start. The balls were still falling but were taking damage as they descended with her. At this point, They were only about 2,000 feet from the ground and still falling with immense speed, so it was only a matter of seconds before they collided with her sections of the city. Elevra continued to attack with force, but even with everything, the balls still didn't stop moving, although they had slowed down a little. As they approached one of the high-rise buildings, Elevra finally decided to use one of her most powerful attacks. Thwimim, a projection of another purplish eye appeared just right above the ball on top. It was very massive, almost half the size of the humongous mountain-sized ball. Zuhum, both the eyes on Elevra's forehead and the projected one shot out massive pillar-sized purplish beams simultaneously. One from above and the other from below. At this point, they were close to slamming into the building when both balls finally exploded. Boom! Boom! The shockwaves slammed into Elevra, sending her crashing straight through the building. Bang! Bang! She came out the other side and slammed into the next building hundreds of feet away. At this point, Gustav had already caught both balls falling towards his side and was holding them up and repeatedly slamming them into each other. Bang! 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 With every collision, the vicinity would vibrate, and cracks had already appeared on different parts of the road underneath Gustav's feet. Just when the balls were starting to crack apart, two massive balls shot out of the sky again. One towards Gustav's section and the other towards Elevra's. These ones were faster than the previous ones. Elevra, who had just stopped the two earlier, was still lodged into a building on the west, trying to get herself out. Gustav smashed both balls together again, trying to destroy them before the third one could arrive, but then it was too fast. By the time it reached his section, Gustav had raised his leg and swung it upwards like a football player. Bang! He kicked the ball straight back up into the sky and finally smashed the two balls in his possession together, causing them to explode. Each ball was still the size of a mountain, so the spectators were shocked that he could kick one of them back to the sky. Energy 1200/15,000. Seeing as he had lost nearly all his energy, Gustav deactivated size manipulation and returned back to his original size. He decided to deal with the last one that way. Meanwhile, on Elevra's side, she had only noticed the massive ball headed towards her section when it was too late. She was unable to stop it before it slammed into a part of the city. Zing. Elevra was immediately teleported back to the facility before the whole city got decimated. Gustav was now the last special class cadet standing after passing through a number of 78 rounds. The spectators watched him destroy the third massive ball after a few minutes. When Elevra arrived back, the spectating cadets had looks of awe on their faces as they stared at her. Dash. Elevra lost? Dash. Doesn't this make Gustav the most powerful? Dash. Oh my, Gustav is still going. Chatter. 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 Discussions broke out as everyone couldn't stop talking about what had just happened. Elevra had several injuries, but they weren't serious, so she took a simple recovery pill to heal. She was unbothered by the voices of the cadets in the background. Instead, she had a smile on her face. That was really interesting, Gustav. I accept defeat this time, she said internally as she stared at the holographic monitor where Gustav could be seen standing on the tall mast again. Ildris and the rest had looks of excitement on their faces as they stared at each other and fist bumped before looking back at the holographic monitor. Good job, man. He muttered underneath his breath. At this point, everyone thought the challenge would end, but to their surprise, they suddenly saw the clouds split open again. Sruh! 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 This time 4 of these balls started falling from the sky in a lined-up format. The spectators' eyes widened as they saw this. Dash. He's definitely losing this round. Dash. That's too much. Destroying 2 was a hassle, talk more of 4. Gustav stared at the 4 massive mountain-sized balls lined up on each other, descending with immense force. His dirty blonde hair started swimming in the wind as his uniform made flapping sounds. Well, I've been wanting to try this. Let's see how much destruction you can cause, Gustav said as he activated Gravitational Energy Container Bloodline. The gravitational force around him began to twist and turn at this point, giving the atmosphere a weird vibe. "Don't tell me you're going to use it," the system voiced out internally. "This is an experiment. I'm going to use this to find out how destructive it is," Gustav responded as a head-sized orb appeared in front of him. Chapter 486. This is an experiment. I'm going to use this to find out how destructive it is, Gustav responded as a head-sized orb appeared in front of him. It was reddish-black in color with purplish electric snakes swimming around it. It was oozing with so much energy that a certain kind of pressure was released into the air. Luckily, no one was in the vicinity to sense it. From the holographic monitors, the spectators stared at the orb floating in front of Gustav with a look of curiosity. They wondered what it was since they had never seen it before, but Hendrik recognized this orb's shape from his last fight with Gustav in the neighborhood. Why is the color different? He wondered since it was bluish in color back then. Gustav raised his right hand, causing the orb to float above it. "Are you sure? You know, doing this is practically revealing that your strength compared to that of your peers is several levels higher," the system voiced out. "I know. It's all right. I'm the first cadet to be an officer before even starting training. This will make the higher-ups think twice before doing anything stupid against me in the future. It will definitely raise my value and they won't want to lose me. It's all part of the plan," Gustav explained as he looked upwards with a serious expression. He descended a little bit before leaping into the air with the orb in his grasp. Through him, everyone's eyes remained on him as he ascended upwards, cutting through the sky. As Gustav closed in on the lineup of massive mountain-sized balls, he arched his arm back intensely. "Fwah!" He threw his hand forward with force just when he was about 50 feet away from the collision. The orb flew upwards further as it still cackled with purplish electric arcs. At this point, Gustav's ascent was reaching its limit as his body started coming to a stop in midair. The moment his body paused and was about to start descending, the orb arrived in front of the first ball. Shish hi hiyan. The moment contact was made, a bright dark reddish light enveloped a radius of more than 3,000 feet in midair, and what came next was an ear-piercing explosion. Boom! Ripple of destructive waves spread from the point of impact, obliterating all physical objects that made contact with in the process. Bang! Gustav, whose body was descending, was hit by the shockwaves and sent tumbling down faster. Gustav coughed out blood after the shockwaves hit him as he felt his head ringing from the collision. "How is it so powerful?" Gustav said internally with a shocked expression as his body shot down from the air with speed. The first ball was completely obliterated as the ripple of destructive waves spread across the sky and kept spreading towards the rest. To the spectators' awe, it completely consumed the next ball, obliterating it as well and kept spreading. At this point, the sky was covered by the reddish ripple of destructive waves that kept increasing in size. The shockwaves caused Gustav to slam into one of the buildings, and his body kept flying through several walls, breaking them in the process before flying out of the back of the building. As his body kept traveling backwards and downwards due to the impact, Gustav was about to slam into another building when he suddenly spun in the air, regaining his balance. Zoom! He did a flip when he was close to colliding with the window of the next skyscraper and landed both his feet on them, controlling the force before pushing himself forward. Fwaya! He somersaulted forward in midair and spiraled towards the street in the middle. Bang! In a few seconds he landed on the ground in a crouching format as a cloud of dust spread around him. Boom! 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 The shockwaves from the orb's energy slammed into several buildings in the vicinity, causing windows to blast apart, raining glass upon the streets. After completely consuming all three mountain-sized balls in the sky, the ripples suddenly stopped spreading and started shrinking. So Gustav stabilized himself after landing on the ground and stared at the sky. The ripples of destruction suddenly shrank completely and disappeared into a blue dot after consuming all three balls. Only one was left at this point. Gustav cleaned the blood from the side of his mouth before leaping upwards once again to destroy the last ball. Back in the facility, the entire hall had turned quiet. The cadets, Instructors and inspectors all had awe-stricken looks and couldn't wrap their heads around how a first year was supposed to have enough power to do that. From what they had just witnessed, Gustav had enough power to destroy a section of the city with the attack he had just made use of. Everyone had thought he wouldn't be able to pull it off, but he did with more ease than he had been doing before. Destroying 3 balls in one go. Isn't he supposed to be a marshal ranked? That level of destruction. It is very close to an echo rank powerhouse if not on par. And he's not even a second-year cadet yet. We have this footage sent to Great Commander Cheyenne. The inspectors couldn't believe their eyes and decided to send the footage of the last 1 minute in particular to Great Commander Cheyenne. After destroying the last ball, Gustav once again descended downwards and landed at the top of a 400-story tall skyscraper. He still felt pain in his body from the earlier collision of the shockwaves, but he was starting to feel better compared to before. I could harm myself with that. I have to be careful, Gustav thought with a look of reflection. His body defense was very high, yet the collision still affected him that much. He could already imagine just how much a normal cadet would be affected if the ripple of destructive waves hit them. Chapter 487. You were right. I should only use this on an opponent I'm sure is more powerful than I am. Also, it certainly shouldn't be used in cities or neighborhood to avoid casualties since it covers a wide range, Gustav said internally. Well, I told you, didn't I? The system responded with a slightly frustrated tone. I also need to be very far from its range, Gustav added after recalling he was nearly obliterated as well just now. Now he felt he should only resort to using this in emergency situations. Just what was that, and how is he able to cause such destruction? It must have been a sure finishing attack move. I'm sure he can only use such an attack once. Yeah, that definitely is a sure finishing attack move, but way too powerful. Here we were thinking he wasn't that much stronger than Elevera. The cadets began discussing and arguing about Gustav's last move. Most of them felt he would only be able to use an attack of such power only once. If only they knew that Gustav had over 200 of these orbs hidden away in his invisible gravitational field. After a few seconds, Gustav was teleported back to the facility. There was no way the challenge would be continued since its difficulty was already bordering on the level of senior cadets. Everyone stared at him like he was a god after his arrival. Some of them wondered if they were even peers. They would occasionally stare at Endrik as well, who was sitting somewhere behind. Endrik had managed to be among the top 12 special class cadets, and he was only 12. Everyone here was at least 5 years older than Endrik, yet his strength level was frightening at such a young age. They realized that both brothers would definitely grow to become top powerhouses in the MBO when the time came. One of the instructors came forward to say a few things as the scores and improvement rate of the cadets were displayed in descending order. 1. Gustav Crimson 1300% 960 points. 2. Elevra Thorn 1100% 780 points. 3. Ildris Curtis 900% 520 points. The list continued on like that, and only about 2 normal cadets happened to be high on the list. Ria was one of them with a score of 400. Most of the special class Kate's improvement rate was not too distant from each other. Gustav's, of course, was still the highest. The updated first-year ranking was displayed by the side, and now Gustav was number 1 on that as well. Gustav's name wasn't the only one that moved up. Angie, Glade, Endrik and Matilda also had an increase in their ranks. Even though Elevra had dropped to number 2, it was without a doubt that she was still a formidable opponent with what she had displayed. Anyone would immediately cross-challenging her off their minds. However, Gustav's strength was just out of everyone's league right now that a lot of them felt being in his presence was illegal. Elevra now realized that she was right all along. Gustav had truly been hiding his strength. After the event ended, the inspectors asked Gustav to wait behind for a brief meeting with them and the instructors. He did as he was told and waited behind as the other cadets left. The inspectors addressed themselves first, commending them on their work so far, and passed across a few instructions from Great Commander Cheyenne. Gustav was here the whole time they discussed things that shouldn't be heard by cadets, but no one dared to tell him off since the inspectors had asked him to wait behind. After the brief meeting was concluded, the three inspectors pulled Gustav to a corner for a brief private discussion. Gustav, as I'm sure you are aware, you will be undergoing your first mission few weeks from now, Inspector Ryan voiced out. Yes, Gustav responded. Initially we were supposed to give you a 3-day test before sending you out on the field, but now we've changed our minds, Inspector Darby, the only female among the trio, added. Oh, I see, Gustav responded with an unbothered tone. Your detachable MBO officer badge is ready. We can't tell if you will be sent on an undercover mission or a battle mission yet, or maybe a mixture of both, but you will be informed of everything a few days prior, Inspector Ryan stated. All right. Anything else? Gustav asked. Yes, we have been informed about the death battle issued with your little bro. Before the inspector could complete his statement, Gustav interrupted. I don't have a brother. You must be mistaken, he voiced out. It clearly states that you two are biologically related from the reports, Inspector Darby said with a tone of confusion. With all due respect, inspectors, learn to make proper research before making statements. I do not have a brother, Gustav stated. All three inspectors stared at each other in confusion for an instant before resuming, turning to face Gustav again. If that is so, then, our apologies. But I'm sure you know who we are referring to, Inspector Ryan said with a mild tone. Skipped my mind. Whoever I challenge is already gone, Gustav said with a casual tone. Ahem, it's Endrikoslav, Inspector Orion stated. So, what about him? Gustav asked. We want you to cancel your request for a death match with him, the inspector added. Gustav stared at him for a few seconds with a straight expression. No. His tone of decline was so strong and powerful that even the inspectors were a little taken aback. They were inspectors, so everyone fawned on them. This was the first time they were receiving such rejection, and from a cadet nevertheless. We do not wish to lose any one of you two to such a battle. We believe you both can come to an agreement, find a common ground. Before the inspector could complete his statement, he was once again interrupted by Gustav. No. There is no common ground. The only agreement I want is his to the death match. Gustav remained unflinching as he voiced out, You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.